A luxurious mansion was shrouded in a hazy mist. It was a perfect night to die under the wheels of a carriage. The question of how it all began froze in her emerald eyes, and what ended here was blood. The face of an approaching bystander, twisted in fear, did not explain everything, as she herself exclaimed. Why did you have to run her over? Because if her sister dies, no one will be left to compose new pieces for them. The person she was talking to replied that they should go, or they might get into trouble. In the last moments of her life, the girl, covered in blood, looked at her murderers, her younger sister and older brother. Then, another man approached. Wow, said the man who had been her husband. Forgive me, Ariana, he said, standing before the dying woman, adding that he might have once genuinely loved her. But even then, Ariana had seemed incredibly boring to him. Now he could embrace the one who was more flirtatious and interesting. The two sisters' faces were almost identical, and Ariana's husband considered her younger sister to be full of deceit. Now, let her ask for forgiveness. There was no sincerity in it. She just wanted to announce that she was pregnant with Ariana's husband's child. But Ariana had once considered these people her family. Her brother noticed Ariana was losing a lot of blood, and he even asked if she was okay. But all he cared about was the possibility of lifting fingerprints. In the last moments of her life, that's exactly what he did. Then, with a mocking smile, the brother thanked Ariana, assuring her that her property would be well taken care of. Ariana had been utterly betrayed by everyone. Her brother promised to play the requiem she had composed at her funeral. Ariana prayed with all her might. She just needed one more time. She wanted one more chance. With this thought, she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she couldn't help but cry out in alarm as a plate of fruit slipped from her hands, falling to the floor and shattering. The maid rushed over to help, worried that her mistress might be hurt. Ariana couldn't remember why she was preparing these things, and even asked the maid, Sophie, who explained that today they were having tea with the Marquis of Peregrine, which was the name of Ariana's husband. Only, the maid's tone made it sound as if the wedding hadn't happened yet, but she was touched that Ariana was already calling him her husband. She said the Marquis was already in the garden, and the young lady could go find him. But Ariana remembered that she and Lucas had been married for 5 years. Besides, these memories were so real. With these thoughts, Ariana walked into the garden. She thought this might just be a dream, but then she noticed the decorations in the garden, which were in a style popular 5 years ago. Perhaps these were all hallucinations before death. Enough! Stop it! A voice came from somewhere in the garden. A female voice asserted that she was not in the mood today. The girl said she had heard the wedding date was set, and she was very upset about it. But the man told Elena not to worry, because it meant that from now on they would be living under the same roof. Ariana didn't know if this was a dream or not, but now she understood that the relationship between these two had started even before the wedding. This hypocrisy had been going on for so long. Just then, someone called out to Ariana. It was her brother. He wanted to know where she was. He told the girl to go to his room after tea. Perhaps she had forgotten, but they had a lesson today. The Lopez family of counts was famous for its musical talent, yet Edward had not inherited it. Now, he angrily asked Ariana why she was silent. He had suggested joint lessons, claiming it was to revise his sister's compositions. In fact, he just stole them, and these works were all performed in the Lopez family's opera house, built by their maternal grandfather and sung by their sister, Elena. Ariana watched all this from the audience. She was aware of the situation, but didn't object to living for them. She asked her brother what the date was today. It was November 27th, year 325. This was 5 years before Ariana's death. Now, she had a perfect opportunity to take revenge on all of them and protect her music. Ariana told her brother that she suddenly had a brilliant compositional idea and suggested they listen to it. She decided that this time, she would push them all into the abyss. Her brother agreed, although he said he didn't think it would do her any good. He said Ariana still knew nothing about music, while the girl was preparing to play a melody that had come to her mind as she was dying from blood loss. She said her brother was right, that compared to him, she was a complete amateur. Her brother was glad she could realize this, as it was her only virtue. He told her to hurry up and play, so he could hear what kind of inspiration had suddenly struck her. Ariana tried to recall what kind of music she used to like back then, but more importantly, she had to figure out how to treat the family she had once loved so dearly. Did she have enough willpower to take revenge on them? She played a melody that everyone in the mansion heard. The sounds made everyone freeze and turn around. Ariana continued to play. "Miss, that's wonderful," the maid exclaimed. She swore it was the best performance she had ever heard. The Marquis asked Ariana what she had just played. He came from the garden, still with leaves on him. Ariana replied that it was an improvisation. Elena also said her sister's piece was wonderful, and Ariana pointed out that Elena's voice would be perfect for this song. But Elena replied that her vocal range was a bit low for such high notes. Ariana smiled, expressed her regret, and then said she had just thought of a perfect name. It would be Aria of Adultery. Elena asked if such a name wasn't too vulgar. Ariana asked if she really thought it was too much, and Elena was certain of it. But Ariana replied that she thought it was just right. Elena asked her sister what she meant, and Ariana replied that the name was best precisely because it was vulgar. Ariana pointed out that throughout history, it is passion that has captured people's hearts. But this did not convince Elena that one could give a work such a title. Her brother said he liked the idea too. He thought Ariana was right, that it would definitely cause a sensation. But Elena said, who cares about a sensation if the name is too strange? Her brother suggested giving a chance. After all, Ariana had said that no one but Elena could sing this aria. It took Elena a moment to come up with an answer. Ariana paid her no more mind and asked if she could go upstairs now to continue her work, because now she felt she could write everything from the overture to the final aria. Really, all of it, her brother confirmed with anticipation and ordered her to bring it to him when she was done so he could improve it. The Marquis, who had overheard their conversation, said that this time Ariana would be in charge of the opera from beginning to end. The girl promised to do everything within her power to write it well. This time, she thought she would never let her work be taken from her. Elena indignantly asked the Marquis if he was really going to stage an opera with such scandalous content. He replied that this performance was very important. After all, Dante Heigenberg had returned to the capital, and to welcome him, a grand performance would be held at the Paradise Palace. So they couldn't let them steal all the spotlight. This performance was meant to cause a sensation. Ariana thought of Dante Heigenberg. Suddenly, this man became her opportunity. She asked if Dante was really returning to the capital. The Marquis noted that this time he had left a trail of blood behind him. They said he had just defeated some barbarians. The Marquis looked at Elena and commented that his future sister-in-law had better stay away from such a man. Elena replied that she knew, because they said his life was very decadent, as if he invited singers to his bedroom every night. Paradise was actually a cabaret, while the Lopez Opera House was a place of refined entertainment for the nobility. Paradise was an entertainment venue where commoners drank and watched shows, a place that had become a sanctuary for the most depraved. And Dante Heigenberg was the master of Paradise, a war hero with blood on his hands up to his elbows. He had once asked Ariana why she wasted her talent on people who didn't understand how precious her gift was, letting them get rich. He advised the girl to stop being foolish and go with him, because only he could polish her talent like a gemstone. Dante was the only one who had noticed that Ariana's family was exploiting her talent. She should go see him. This thought brought Ariana to Paradise. It was the first time she had seen this sanctuary for the fallen. She was immediately noticed and asked who she was looking for here. Dante's agent approached her. Ariana introduced herself and asked if she could see his master. The young man hesitated because, unfortunately, his master did not see anyone without an appointment. Ariana asked him to convey that she was only asking for 5 minutes of his time. If she failed to interest him within that time, she would offer compensation. "All right," said the Duke. He noted that the lady was begging him for 5 minutes of his time. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Your Grace," said Ariana. She said she had come to offer him something. Dante said their conversation could end there, as he didn't think she could offer him anything. But Ariana had brought something with her. She asked for a moment of his time to explain everything. Dante looked skeptically at the kalimba in the girl's hands. Ariana began to play a melody, and the first few notes made Dante freeze. The melody of the kalimba enveloped the hall, the notes flowing freely from Ariana's fingertips. The girl focused on her playing. Finally, she opened her eyes. "Is it not good enough?" 5 billion Caden. The Duke ordered, on the condition that all parts must be complete, "Give this piece to me." 5 billion for one piece, Ariana thought. That was a very generous offer. But she thanked the Duke out loud, because that was not the price she wanted. She had entirely different ambitions. She wanted to become the Duke's wife. Dante did not expect this. After blurting out her proposal, Ariana froze. The Duke asked if she intended to trade one piece of music for the position of his wife. Ariana pointed out that if he had ever heard music at the Lopez house, then all of those compositions were written by her. Dante commented that he had always thought they were written by the Count. "That's not true," Ariana replied. "She wrote all the music, while her brother only made minor changes." Well, to be honest, the Duke exclaimed, the offer seemed tempting to him, and the person he was talking to was interesting. Ariana added that she wanted to take back all her works from her brother, but the laws of the empire prevented her. According to this law, unmarried women could not own private property, including copyrights. Dante realized that the girl wanted to use him as a shield before the law to prevent her music from being taken away and attributed to her brother. He understood completely. "Just for 1 year," Ariana said, "until I find a way to protect my music and complete her revenge." If Dante took her as his wife, she would become the exclusive composer for Paradise. The Duke commented that the position of his wife was worth more than $5 billion. Ariana reminded him that he was currently looking for an excuse to avoid the princess's marriage proposal. He could use Ariana as his future wife, a simple and elegant excuse to refuse the princess. She would also ask for nothing, and he would not have to provide for her material needs. Dante said that one should not hide their cards when playing a game with him. To protect her music from being taken by her brother, Ariana needed legal protection, but the Duke wanted to know if she needed anything else. She had one more request. She asked Dante to pretend that he truly loved her. The Duke laughed, saying he liked Ariana Lopez's audacity, even though the girl had not yet told him her name. But the last condition did not suit him. He would not pretend. A poor imitation was worse than nothing. Even if it was a temporary deal, as long as Ariana occupied the position of his wife, she would have to play her role sincerely. He asked her how she felt about such a proposal. If she didn't agree, she could still run away. The man tried to intimidate Ariana, but she couldn't back down now. She said she was fine with the proposal. The Duke looked into her eyes, almost embracing her. "Relax, Ariana," he said, pulling her closer. He thought she was not suited for the role of prey about to be eaten. "I am relaxed," the girl said. Their gazes met. The Duke let her go, saying she had guts. As he left, he promised to discuss all the details soon. Ariana was left standing there, bewildered. Dante was with his aide-de-camp. He asked him why he pretended not to know the lady. After all, he had even been to the opera house. Dante told his aide to shut up. He only went to the opera house for fun, but it was a 2-hour performance. Ariana Lopez wanted to pretend she didn't know the Duke, although she might have really forgotten him. Dante himself didn't know which of the two possibilities annoyed him more. Ariana returned home. Now it was time to catch her breath. This man had drained all her energy in a single meeting, and she was going to be his wife. Now she didn't know if it was a good idea. Dante was the man Lucas was most jealous of, and the man Elena most desired. So Ariana needed this man. But she did get nervous towards the end of the meeting. If she hadn't known his secret, she would have been much more afraid. An excited maid greeted Ariana. She reported that the Marquis of Peregrine had arrived. He had been sitting in the drawing room for about 2 hours. It was strange. What could he be doing here without his fiancé? Well, she would change and go ask. Elena appeared, and the maid told her there was a gift for her. Elena was delighted that her admirer had sent her jewelry from Pierre. Then she noticed Ariana. Elena asked where her sister had been, as the Marquis had been waiting for almost nothing. She was gone for so long, but she didn't have to worry, because Elena had taken care of the guest. Ariana thanked her, but she advised Elena to be more careful next time. Elena asked why. Ariana reminded her that an unmarried girl should not spend too much time with her sister's fiancé, because there could be gossip. Elena told her not to say such things, as they were just spending time together as a family. After all, the Marquis greatly appreciated Elena's talent, even comparing it to a lovely gem. No one understood an artistic nature like the Marquis. She asked Ariana to accept this, even if she didn't like it. Ariana remembered she always said something similar, as if there was a special bond between her and Lucas that Ariana couldn't understand. Not a romance between a man and a woman, but a nobler, creative connection, artistic nature, said Ariana. She asked if Elena had learned all the different time signatures, but she knew that with her sister's brain, it was a miracle she could even learn the notes. Said Elena. She hurried to leave, as her sister was in a bad mood today. She would go downstairs first so Ariana could change and rest on the sofa. Ariana wondered what Elena and Lucas had been doing on that sofa. Ariana was left alone in the room. She approached the sofa. Her attention was drawn to 2 strands of hair left on the pillow. Red and light-colored hair were intertwined. This was really interesting. Ariana went down to the drawing room, where Elena's singing could already be heard. She noted that her sister was a little off-key, but Elena thought she was joking. Afterwards, Ariana greeted her guest. The Marquis asked why he had to wait so long for her, and she responded by saying she had good news to share. Ariana reported that Elena seemed to have a lover and showed a strand of hair she had found at her boudoir. Elena and the Marquis became wary. Ariana noted that the Marquis's hair was the same color as this strand, and she asked if it was his. Perhaps the Marquis had entered her boudoir. Yes, that's right, Lucas exclaimed. He explained that he was so bored waiting for her that he went in to look at his fiancée's wardrobe. He didn't think there was anything strange about it. Why shouldn't he be interested in his future wife's wardrobe? He said that Ariana was so spontaneous, and with their wedding approaching, he had to buy her a lovely dress, and some jewelry wouldn't hurt either. Ariana realized he was clearly trying to distract her by talking about dresses and jewelry. She asked aloud if this was true. Lucas replied that his future wife deserved such gifts. The butler approached and announced the arrival of a messenger from Master Pierre. Ariana feigned surprise. Then she turned to Lucas, guessing that he had summoned the artisan for her. "I'm so happy," Ariana said to Lucas. She didn't seem to notice that Elena's face was darker than a storm cloud. In the box brought by the master was a set of sparkling jewelry. The master was pleased to have satisfied the young lady. He showed how they had carefully engraved the initials requested by the customer. Ariana guessed whose initials they would be. They most likely belonged to Elena, and not Ariana Lopez. The girl said aloud that she was glad the jewelry had her initials, and said she was touched that the Marquis had prepared everything. Lucas was surprised by Ariana's smile. Her beautiful but usually sad face looked completely different with such a radiant smile. He said he had prepared all this for her, because when she was happy, he was happy too. Ariana noticed the earrings and bracelet. The master said they would look great as a set. The master noted that the young lady had excellent taste, and these pieces were usually bought as a set. Ariana happily thanked the Marquis for such a gift. Lucas assured her it was a sincere token of his affection for Ariana. He couldn't imagine how much all this would cost him. "I have to go," said Elena. She was going to her voice lesson. As the door slammed shut, Lucas thought to himself that it wasn't easy to satisfy the desires of two women at once, but he could always get Elena another necklace. Ariana understood what was going through the minds of these two. The girl looked at the jewelry and felt strange. When she was the Marchioness of Petrigran, she couldn't even dream of such luxury. Lucas was very stingy, even on things like servants' wages. Ariana asked the butler, Wilhelm, how much the set could be sold for, and he said 50 million Caden. Ariana ordered everything to be sold, and Wilhelm was surprised that she would do this with the Marquis's gift. The girl asked for secrecy and for him to find her a good intelligence guild. Ariana went into the city herself. She had important business in the building. She went inside, and a young man said the boss wasn't in today, so they were closed. Then he recognized the visitor. He didn't expect to see her here, so he quickly covered his face with his hood. Ariana said she wanted to make a request and asked if they were working. When the young man spoke again, she noticed his voice had changed. The young man claimed his name was Leonard, and he was the master of this guild, because which family actually ruled here was supposed to be a secret from Miss Lopez. Ariana said she wanted proof of her fiancé's infidelity. The request shocked the other person. She replied that her fiancé was having an affair with her sister, and she wanted to catch them in the act and then break off the engagement. She didn't understand why the man was so surprised. Love triangles were a major source of income for intelligence guilds and didn't surprise anyone. Ariana said that her fiancé and sister met without any discretion in the garden or her boudoir, so it shouldn't be hard to catch them. She had also heard that this guild actively used cameras. At this time, photography was still a recent invention, but it would become more and more popular in the coming years. But many people considered photography dangerous and tried to avoid cameras, as they said a soul could get trapped in a photograph. This worked in Ariana's favor, as Elena and Lucas would never imagine their shameful acts could appear in a photo. Ariana requested a photo of them together within 2 weeks. She wanted to break off this engagement and arrange a new one within that time. The young man thought it was a harsh decision to jump from one engagement to another so quickly. He asked if the young lady's new husband would be a trustworthy person. After all, it was hard to imagine a better way to get revenge on an ex than to start a new marriage and have children. But Ariana replied that it wasn't like that at all. She said she would not have a physical relationship with her new husband. After all, her new fiancé was impotent. This frustrated her interlocutor, but he promised that her order would be completed on time. For him, it was a very stressful meeting. After the visitor left, another employee asked when Sir Leo had returned. He replied that he was leaving again, that he had some business to attend to. The employee reminded him that it was his job, not Sir Leo's. He didn't understand why he had taken on this task. They noticed their conversation was being watched. It was His Grace the Duke. The interlocutors didn't know he had heard the conversation. They asked how long he had been here, and the Duke noted that he had failed to impress the woman this time. He wondered why Ariana would think he was impotent. Leo also had no idea where Miss Lopez got such an idea. She did say she wasn't nervous. He thought she was an impudent woman who thought she couldn't hurt him. This was a complete surprise. How dare she? At this moment, Ariana was walking down the street, thinking it was time to start the real action. She had three main goals. She had already been to the Intelligence Guild. Then she needed to talk to Dante about the engagement and find a suitable soprano. Finding a soprano was key. Ariana would completely destroy the Lopez Opera House and her family. They would have no chance to recover. Her tool for revenge would be music, the music she wrote. But the quality of the music wouldn't matter if no one heard it. And it had to be said, Elena was an excellent performer. In 5 years, she would be the best in the empire, except for one person. Ariana had an idea and knew where to find this person. She hoped she was right. Suddenly, she heard some sounds. Someone was crying with such a beautiful voice. Ariana decided to go and see. Even just crying, the volume and resonance were impressive. At this time, Elena had a favorite hobby. She loved to crush the hopes of aspiring singers. Elena said that if Rosalina's singing was considered good, then even pigeons could be excellent singers, saying her hair looked like a dried rose. This was exactly the color of the crying girl's hair. Ariana asked if she was okay, because if she sat like that, she would catch a cold. Ariana wrapped the girl in her cloak. The girl said the lady was very kind. She promised to repay this kindness. Ariana looked at what Rosalina looked like at that age. She asked the girl what she was doing here. Rosalina replied that she had always dreamed of becoming a singer. One day, she got a chance to realize this dream. She received an invitation to sing one song at Paradise, owned by Duke Heisenberg. It was a happy evening, and Rosalina met the most famous singer of our time, who came over and asked if her companion was her lover. That singer said Rosalina's boyfriend was a pretty good musician, but unfortunately his voice ruined his performance. Rosalina didn't hear anything good about herself, but she ignored those words. But she thought she had time to prepare well for the performance. However, her lover suddenly disappeared. He only left a letter in which he said he had met his true love. After hearing Rosalina's story, Ariana thought that this was most likely Elena's doing. Rosalina said she had been looking for a musician, but no one wanted to play for an amateur like her, and it was so unfair that she had to miss such an opportunity. But there was nothing she could do. Ariana reached out her hand, and Rosalina wondered who this lady was, who asked her for the time. She had such beautiful hair. Ariana asked what time the performance at Paradise was scheduled. Rosalina said from 4 to 5, and there wasn't much time left. "Get up, we have to get on stage," said Ariana. She told the girl to warm up her voice, and she would take care of the rest. She would accompany her, and Rosalina just needed to sing. But she was planning to sing a rather difficult piece, the aria of Possession. Ariana noted that it was a piece with many complex techniques. Rosalina was worried she shouldn't have said that, as this wonderful stranger might run away, afraid the piece was too complicated. But she could also back down and sing some children's songs, as long as she could get on stage. She promised any other song would be fine. Ariana replied that they would go with the first option, that the aria of Possession had brought the Lopez Opera House its first full house, that it was the prima aria. The accompaniment is complex due to the changes in tonality, which symbolize the heroine's emotional state. straight. Rosalina was surprised that the stranger was fine with the song. Ariana said she wrote the piece herself, and so they ended up at Paradise. Ariana looked around. This was what Paradise looked like at the time. The stage was in terrible condition, which was to be expected, as Paradise was not a formal concert hall. Surprisingly, 5 years later, it would be the one to shake the entire empire. There were rumors that Dante had no intention of cherishing Paradise. His interest was not in performance or opera, but in music itself. In any case, they couldn't perform in such an environment. Ariana turned to the maid and said she wanted to change the set. After all, this one was too close to the audience, and the reflectors were not where they should be. And if you look at the stage, the way the light falls is completely unsuitable. The whole arrangement was very inconvenient for the singer and the audience. Bad for everyone. Everyone was surprised by the strange lady's orders. Was she really going to accompany them today? And the singer turned out to be an unremarkable country girl whose nose for some reason was as red as a tomato. But it didn't matter if her level was too low. She would just be cut off mid-performance. The audience buzzed about the new singer's performance. No one had ever heard of her before. Now everyone assumed it was just some kind of fake. Rosalina walked onto the stage with determination. She finally had a chance to show her talent. She had to handle it, and she would do her best. With the help of her benefactor, she would manage. Ariana looked at Rosalina. Then she began to play a melody, and from the very first notes, everything was clear. This lady's playing was special, and now Rosalina must not make a mistake either. Rosalina placed her hand on her chest and began to sing, "Your eyes, your breath, I long for them to be all mine." These were the lyrics of the aria of Possession. It was a story about a great enchantress who accidentally entered a temple and fell in love with a priest. She realized a true possessiveness that neither jewels nor handsome young men could evoke. So she rejoiced, proclaiming to all that she wanted to possess his entire life. Even if it dims its light, I desire you so. Why can't we be together? Rosalina sang. The audience was stunned by the singing, but what amazed them even more was the accompanist playing. More and more people gathered near the stage. Rosalina thought that the next line was very important. It told of how the heroine fully understood her fervent first love. As long as you can be mine. Rosalina sang. At that moment, something went wrong with her throat, probably because she had been sitting in the cold for too long. She didn't know what to do because she now had to sing a very high note. When the accompaniment faded, everyone would hear her voice crack. But suddenly, Rosalina heard Ariana remove that line from the song, and she turned to her benefactor. The benefactor winked at her. Ariana bought herself some time. Her playing was so wonderful, it was hard to believe she could improvise so easily. Rosalina thought she could. She had to sing for her benefactor. I will never regret it, only I will stand by your side. Rosalina finished singing, and then she froze. She looked at the audience, and the applause was thunderous. Rosalina was happy, and Ariana looked at her happily too. The audience said the singer was simply mesmerizing. She had an amazing voice and could hit high notes like the distinguished singer Elena Lopez. Some wondered if the aria of Possession had always been like this, but that long musical passage was so harmonious, it felt like it had always been there. Everyone wondered who was accompanying them, but the person's face was hidden by a hood.mr. Lopez, it could be him. Rosalina thought. Her benefactor said she wrote this aria. So does that mean she is Mr. Edward Lopez? Ariana smiled and said her real name. Another person approached the girls. Ariana recognized him. It was Dante. He also recognized the girl and said she was inspired. He asked if she was using his establishment to promote a new singer. Indeed, Ariana wanted to give her some prestige if she was going to have her face off against Elena in a soprano duel soon. Ariana asked the Duke for forgiveness if their performance, without his permission, had offended him. But Dante said she could use everything he owned, because he also intended to make good use of her. Rosalina was shocked. It was the Duke himself. She didn't understand what was happening. Dante whispered to Ariana that the situation wasn't so bad. The girl felt like she was about to be eaten, but this must be another test. She said aloud that she wasn't afraid at all. Dante noted that she was a tough nut to crack, and he would love to make her pay for this insolence. But they were engaged, after all, so everything could be postponed until after the wedding. At this time, in another place, Edward was sitting at a card table. He said he felt great and went all in. Elias Reiner, an investor in the Lopez Opera House, interrupted him and called him to the other side of the salon. Tomorrow was the first rehearsal for the opera prepared for the San Vertito Festival, and Reiner suggested Edward shouldn't be in the salon so late. Edward thought Reiner was acting so arrogant and bossy just because he was an investor. He could have all the fun he wanted because he had already finished composing, and now it was up to the musicians. Reiner replied that after hearing the adapted version of the aria of Possession, he was very much looking forward to the performance. Edward knew nothing about an adaptation, but Reiner assured him it sounded even better than the original. "Excuse me," said Edward. Reiner said the original was magnificent, but he always felt the flute part in the last movement was a bit superfluous. In the new version, this part was removed and replaced with an extended interlude. This infuriated Edward because he was the author of what was now being called a superfluous flute part. But one couldn't get angry at Reiner's opinion because he had helped the Lopez Opera House achieve success. The next morning, in the mansion, Elena was reading a new newspaper. It said that Duke Heisenberg had publicly shown interest in a mysterious woman. This was the Duke's first public romance, but no one knew who the lady was. Elena choked with anger. How could the Duke not flirt with a princess, but with some vagrant? If so, there must be something fishy about it. Elena saw it from the stage. During the performance, the Duke came again, and he couldn't take his eyes off her. He must have come to see Elena. She ordered her maid to invite the Duke to a reception. He could have been Elena's partner, but he ignored her and didn't even send a letter of refusal. It became a laughing stock, as she had said she would come with the Duke, only to show up alone, because a busy man like him had no need to be there. The maid asked the young lady not to worry too much. After all, the star of the opera world was not some unknown singer, but Elena Lopez. Elena asked what she was talking about. The maid just thought she was annoyed by the headline, but Elena only noticed it after hearing these words. It read, singer Rosalind Tanner's successful debut. Rosalind was that simple girl, and Elena had deceived the girl's boyfriend to ruin her performance. But she still managed to debut, which was incredibly infuriating. Music was heard from above the opera house. The musicians had already started rehearsing. The conductor was Ariana Lopez, which annoyed Elena. Ariana wasn't even the lead composer, but she acted as if she were in charge. Elena didn't understand how someone like her sister could become a Marchioness. But if it weren't for his status, if Elena's mother had been at least a low-ranking noble. Just then, a suppressed groan was heard nearby. It was Edward who appeared, and looking at him, Elena asked how much her brother had drunk yesterday. He asked her to be quiet. It was annoying him. Elena decided to have some fun with him, since he was feeling so bad. She said she thought their little sister had changed a bit. Edward retorted that she seemed as pathetic and empty as ever. Elena pointed out to him that as soon as Edward turned his back, Ariana would show off as if she were the lead composer. "What?" asked Edward. Elena asked if he had strengthened the cello part, because the piece was written by her brother, and only he could revise it. But the musicians were so obedient to Ariana, and Edward was furious. Ariana was completely immersed in the music, and Edward roughly pushed her away. The girl fell to the floor. Edward shouted that Ariana knew nothing about this, and to not dare interfere. Then he asked the musicians why professionals were listening to an amateur. He told them to start over from the beginning. Again, from the beginning. Edward said the violins were out of tune. "They're too loud. I can only trust my intuition, regardless of what this girl scribbled." Edward shouted that everyone was fired. "This piece doesn't need so many violins." Just then, someone hit Edward on the back of the head. He collapsed to the floor. Ariana said his voice was out of tune, too loud for a drunkard. Shortly before this, things were like this. Among the musicians was a violinist named Ruben. His arm hurt, but he couldn't stop playing. But he didn't even have enough money to fix his house, let alone see a doctor. This violin was the only inheritance his aristocratic mother had left him, so he had to play and not let anyone find out he was in pain. If Edward noticed, he would fire him on the spot. Edward appeared, angrier than ever. "He made me start over and over again." Ruben did his best, but Edward didn't like it and demanded they play it again. Starting over was an unreasonable torture, and Ruben had to endure it all. It was just a minor injury, and he could see a doctor as soon as the performance was over. But playing for a long time would worsen the injury. Edward shouted that the violins were out of tune because they were too loud. Then he he fired everyone. Ruben realized he would have nothing to live on next month. This absolutely could not happen. Ruben jumped up to protest, but he just didn't make it in time. Ariana, with a sweet smile, suggested ending this pointless rehearsal. Her brother wouldn't remember anything after being drunk, so she could forget about being fired. Ariana walked over to Ruben and asked him to show her his hand. She noticed the injury on his arm. She knew about it because the sound of his violin trembled slightly. Ariana gave him money so he could see a doctor who would prescribe medicine, and it would heal in a few days. Ariana looked at the musicians. Everyone was exhausted. Edward always took out his anger on the musicians like a tyrant. So if they were injured, they didn't dare tell him, because if Edward found out, he would just fire them. It was unacceptable for skilled musicians to be bullied like this, and Ariana could no longer turn a blind eye. She asked them if they were satisfied with the treatment they received at the opera house. The musicians exchanged glances. Ariana humbly admitted that, in fact, all the achievements of the Lopez Opera House were solely her credit. The musicians didn't understand what she was talking about. Ariana explained that the melody everyone knew as the aria was an adapted version, and then she demonstrated the original. Everyone was shocked by the sound. It was an order of magnitude better, and incredible emotions were conveyed through the music. Ruben realized she was the real composer of the Lopez family. Ariana offered the musicians a new job in an orchestra conducted by herself, not her brother. The musicians surely didn't trust her yet, so she had to convince them, and she offered a much higher salary than they were currently getting. Luis, the conductor of the Lopez Orchestra, immediately said he wanted to join Ariana's orchestra. Ruben said he wanted to as well and asked to join. Many others also wanted to play Miss Ariana's music. It was a victory, but I must think about Edward. The musicians said they would handle the count. They would take care of everything. The lady didn't have to worry about the consequences. Just move forward. Ariana was happy to be able to offer them all this. All the musicians signed contracts with her. She was glad to have formed the orchestra as planned. She also received a letter from the York Information Guild. Read meant the request was completed. Now Ariana could see what kind of photos they had taken. The pictures were quite explicit. Lucas's betrayal was confirmed. Elena was also there, clearly recognizable. There were many of these photos. The operative from the York Guild did a good job, but it was likely that the two of them weren't being particularly careful either. The guild member reported that they had also discovered something else. Elena Lopez patronizes an apothecary. Apothecaries are often visited by women who meet unsuitable men. In her past life, Elena was pregnant with Lucas's child. She must be buying contraceptives now, and the prescription could serve as evidence. The guild member countered that it was the opposite. Elena Lopez was prescribed fertility drugs. This surprised Ariana. The girl walked down the dark street, thinking about it. Elena was trying to get pregnant. She had planned everything from the beginning. Her lies, the seduction of Lucas, until she was pregnant with his child. Ariana thought, a family that can kill can also do other things. It seems my fiancé enjoys nighttime strolls, a voice said nearby. It was Dante, holding a stranger by the collar. When Ariana asked who it was, the Duke threw the stranger aside. He said Ariana hadn't noticed she was being followed. This man had been tailing her, and she had no idea. The Duke dealt with him easily. Dante pointed out that it was obvious to everyone that such a wealthy lady would be a tempting target, especially when she was connected to such an influential person. He was right. Ariana had completely forgotten about caution. She asked for forgiveness. She would not make the same mistake again. Dante asked why she was crying. Ariana wasn't crying. Dante was mistaken. She was just a little tired. Preparing for the wedding was more draining than expected. Dante agreed. It is indeed very difficult when you have not one, but two suitors. He wondered when Ariana planned to get rid of the extra one. She planned to complete all preparations for the wedding with Lucas Petrie gone on time and abandon him at the altar on the day of the ceremony. Dante suggested doing something crazier. For example, he could crash the wedding by declaring his objection or grab her wrist and kiss her in front of everyone. Why wasn't Ariana being more honest? She was afraid to go to this wedding alone. Dante said she couldn't be sure she would get out of this situation unscathed. To be honest, Ariana was scared. She didn't know what Lucas would do in a fit of rage. But she couldn't ask his grace to come to the wedding. She thanked Dante and assured him she could handle it. Dante didn't argue. Another day, the girl was trying on a bracelet. She admired her wrist thoughtfully. The jeweler said that on such fair skin, the rubies look even more striking. He pointed out that not all gentlemen could afford such jewelry. Lucas said they would buy it if his fiancé wanted it, and it was worth mentioning that their show was completely sold out. Showing off the latter was the most obvious reason for this sudden generosity. Ariana hadn't slept much last night. She was tired and just wanted to go home. Lucas looked at her and concluded she was moved, but she was just teary-eyed from yawning constantly. Lucas found Ariana's moved expression quite lovely. He declared that once they were married, his Marchioness would have dozens of such trinkets. Lucas smiled, yes. This trinket was expensive, but it was worth it. Besides, his wallet would soon be full again. He wasn't wrong to invest in the Lopez family. Once the performance gained recognition thanks to Ariana's efforts, they would secure a spot on the main stage of the festival, and his investment would pay off 100-fold. These pleasant thoughts were interrupted by a crazed horse, and Lucas was scared out of his wits. In a panic, he pushed Ariana away. The girl fell, and he started to run. The horse reared up. Someone picked up Ariana, managing to drag her away from the deadly hooves. It was Dante. He asked if the girl was hurt. Ariana asked how he did it. Dante noted that she couldn't be left alone for a minute without getting into trouble. He asked if she would refuse his help. All she needed to do now was tell him she needed him and stop trying to solve her problems on her own. There was nothing to say to that. Dante reminded her that she could use everything he owned. Ariana felt her heart race, but she couldn't tell if it was from surprise or because of the man beside her. Dante held her tightly in his arms. She said she would send him a wedding invitation. Dante smiled. He would be delighted to attend. Lucas finally caught his breath after escaping. He didn't understand where that horse came from. He didn't understand where Ariana had gone. The girl was in another man's arms. Passers-by saw how his grace had saved her life. The ladies whispered that the Duke himself was even more handsome than they had imagined. It was unclear why this handsome and considerate man was nicknamed the Butcher. Lucas was angry at being humiliated because of stupid animal. He rushed back to Ariana, exclaiming that his beloved must have been terrified. The Duke blocked Lucas's path, towering over him with his height. Dante asked if the noble ideals of the Lopez family allowed them to put a woman in danger for their own skin. Lucas didn't expect to be ridiculed. He shouted that he swore he had tried to save Ariana. He grabbed her hand, assuring her that he could have saved her if not for the Duke's intervention. Suddenly, he saw that the ruby bracelet on the girl's wrist was gone. If it had slipped off when the girl fell, then such a large stone should be visible. He hurried to look for it. Fortunately, the bracelet was easily found. Dante offered to buy Miss Lopez a new bracelet. Lucas objected that his grace had no need to give jewelry to his bride. He could buy a new one himself, though inwardly he was furious at having to spend money again after an expensive purchase. Just then, an aide ran up to Dante, saying they had to leave immediately. If they delayed another minute, they wouldn't see His Highness. Dante asked Ariana to inform him if this incident caused her any harm, and she thanked him. Dante kissed her hand goodbye and said he hoped to see her again soon. Lucas was furious that the Duke had just flirted with his woman. He trembled with anger, noticing the lustful gaze the Duke cast upon Ariana. Lucas noticed that Ariana was indeed charming. In fact, she was even more beautiful than Elena. He had never felt such a strong desire to possess Ariana. He could understand why the Duke would fall for her at first sight, but to his grace's regret, Ariana belonged to him. Lucas offered to take Ariana home, then stay the night and visit her room after dark. To Ariana, it sounded like the horse had knocked the last bit of sense out of him. "I'm sorry," Ariana said. Her shoulders still hurt from when Lucas pushed her as the horse charged, so she would walk home by herself. Lucas agreed that if she was injured, she should rest. Ariana said goodbye and left. Lucas realized that the ridicule didn't anger him, but rather made him want her more. After the wedding in 5 days, Ariana would be his forever, and he would make her scream his name with those lovely lips. And so, the precious day arrived. Ariana put on her wedding dress. The maid Sophie exclaimed that she looked stunning. She was even worried that the slug Lucas would fall in love with the young lady all over again. Sophie was angry. How cute. Ariana told her and the butler Wilhelm about Elena and Lucas's affair. Sophie was indignant. Ariana explained that this was why she had no intention of marrying him. Instead, she would marry Duke Heisenberg. Wilhelm didn't understand what she wanted. Ariana asked if he missed the days when the Lopez name was synonymous with musical talent. During her contract with Duke Heisenberg, she intended to restore the former glory of the Lopez name. For that, she needed help. Sophie said she would always be on her mistress's side. She was about to do Ariana's hair, but the comb was snatched from her hand. Elena entered the room, saying Ariana's pale skin made her look like a ghost in that dress. Ariana replied that her sister looked beautiful today. Her dress was so extravagant one might think she was the bride. Elena noted that today she wanted her sister to stand out, as it was her day. But with only 3 days left until the performance, Elena couldn't afford to look completely pale. When I was struck by the golden arrow, I knew I would be its eternal captive, she sang. Ariana thought, Elena loves this song. This was the part of the aria of the courtesan, where the heroine not only accepts her forbidden love, but also vows to atone for it. Ariana said Elena did indeed sing the song beautifully, but her acting needed some work. After all, the heroine was having an affair with the husband of someone who saw her as a sister, which needed to be acted out more vulgarly. Elena was enraged by these words. Ariana said that the current facial expression would be perfect. Elena looked just like a wicked vixen. Elena didn't understand what Ariana was talking about, why she would even speak to her like that. The door creaked, and Lucas's mother walked in. The Marchioness Pedregan had come to see what the noise was. Elena took her hand and asked her to sit down. The Marchioness slapped her hand away, declaring that such an ill-mannered and vulgar creature was not to touch her. The Marchioness glanced sideways at a blushing Elena, saying she could never learn anything from her mother. Having a commoner mother had always been Elena's greatest weakness. Not to mention the person Elena feared most was the highborn Marchioness Pedregan. Elena bowed, saying she would leave at once, Marchioness. After she left, the Marchioness turned her gaze to Ariana. She noted that aside from a decently decorated face, the girl was far too plain and dull for a bride, and she was so thin she didn't look like she could bear children. Ariana remembered that when she was Lucas's wife, this Marchioness had tormented her more than anyone, but this time she refused to be silent. She said that if the seed itself is flawed, then nothing can grow even in the most fertile soil. The Marchioness claimed it was shameful enough that her son was marrying a woman of such a family, and now she dared to insult Lucas in front of his mother. Ariana asked if the Marchioness found the marriage unfair. The Marchioness replied that if it weren't for her naive son, their family would never mix with the likes of the Lopezes. In the Marchioness's eyes, this marriage was already a great blessing, so Ariana was now obligated to serve him well. Ariana retorted that she saw nothing unfair about the union, as her grandfather was a famous musician and her mother was admired by many women for her noble character. So what? The Marchioness reminded her. After their grandfather's death, they became more destitute than any commoner. If Lucas hadn't invested in the opera house, the Lopez family would never have been able to make a comeback. Ariana recalled that it was this very Marchioness who had profited handsomely from the profits of her performances. She had heard that the Marchioness had even borrowed from moneylenders in the past to satisfy her extravagant desires. Ariana thought this would bring more shame to Lucas. The Marchioness shrieked that this insolent girl dared to speak to her in such a tone, a mere country girl their family had condescended to associate with. She tried to slap Ariana, but the girl dodged, and the Marchioness lost her balance. She fell, and Ariana innocently asked if the lady was all right. She said that since the Marchioness needed to rest, she would take her leave. Walking down the corridor, Ariana hoped the Marchioness would wake up before the ceremony began, as she wouldn't want her to miss all the best parts. Miss, a man from the Information Guild called out to the girl, stunned by her breathtaking appearance. But now Ariana had to go with him. He had just caught Lucas and Elena red-handed. Ariana didn't understand what crime they had committed. It was hard to imagine what they could be doing on the wedding day, so they entered the room. Lucas was comforting a crying Elena. Elena complained that Ariana had called her appearance vulgar. Elena complained to Lucas about how Ariana had made fun of her dress when she only wanted to look pretty for her sister's wedding. But Ariana only had hatred for her. Lucas replied that his Ellie was just too soft-hearted, but she shouldn't worry so much. He would scold Ariana harshly for daring to speak ill of her own sister. Elena lamented that Lucas was the only one she could trust. Lucas leaned down to his beloved and kissed her. His hands began to move unscrupulously under Elena's dress. If the boudoir door had been slightly ajar, the scene would have been easy to see. Then Ariana closed the door. She had seen enough. It was too unbearable to watch any longer. The scene far more disgusting than she had imagined. Her companion reminded her that they had gathered enough evidence, but he just felt she needed to see it all with her own eyes. Ariana turned to him and thanked him for bringing her here. On second thought, she should also thank those two, because thanks to their actions, she would have no regrets about what she was about to do. With these thoughts, Ariana walked away and came to the top of the stairs. Her brother blocked her path, eager to know why she was so happy. Ariana said she was just happy that all her dear family members were together. Edward thought his sister was talking nonsense, but he was annoyed enough as it was. What with the Marchioness who had suddenly lost consciousness? He asked who on earth had invited this person. In his opinion, the wedding was simply cursed. He said that since Ariana now belonged to the Pettigran family, she should strive to serve the Marchioness well, as they desperately needed their power and influence. Ariana, Lucas said, also coming down the stairs, pretending he had been looking for her for a long time. He noted that she looked breathtakingly beautiful. Ariana noticed the lipstick mark on Lucas's face, which he hadn't even bothered to wipe off. She told Lucas his lipstick was smudged. Lucas replied that it was from the fruit he had just eaten. Did this man really love Elena so much that he was prepared to cheat on his own wedding day? Ariana wondered. He loved her enough to risk getting caught just to hold her in his arms. On second thought, in their past life, Ariana and Lucas had almost never shared a bed, because Lucas's dignity rarely functioned properly. Sometimes when they did it, he would drag Ariana to a corner of the garden where guests might pass by, or into a dark corridor where servants could appear at any moment. No matter how much Ariana begged him to stop, he would just tell her to shut up. Thinking back, all these situations had one thing in common. There was always a chance of being caught in the act and getting into an embarrassing situation. For Lucas, doing it in places where they might be seen, or having an affair with his wife's sister, was important. Ariana's ex-husband was an impotent man who couldn't get excited without a thrill, but he had managed to succeed once. Ariana looked at Lucas and said, "That was rather quick." Lucas asked his fiancé what she was talking about, what it was that he had to finish quickly. Ariana thought she should tell him she was referring to his ridiculous and pathetic burst of passion. The girl said aloud that the gentleman knew perfectly well what she was talking about. But Lucas didn't understand. He was only worried that Ariana might have guessed something. Elena also arrived in the hall, beaming, confident that the marquee was all hers, just as she had expected. It was Ariana's wedding day, yet Lucas still looked only at Elena with such a passionate gaze that she could feel goosebumps on her skin. Suddenly, she saw someone she never expected to meet at this event. Duke Heigenberg, the emperor's enemy, was attending the wedding of Lucas, who supported his majesty. Perhaps he had come to see Elena, too. Of course he had, because he had come to see all her performances time and time again. Maybe he had refused her invitation last time, because something urgent came up. Elena approached the Duke to greet him, then announced that she was the bride's sister. "Oh, it's you," the Duke said coolly. Elena beamed. He remembered her. She knew he had come to see her. He was a charming, charismatic, brave, and dangerous man. Today was the perfect opportunity for Elena to get close to this man. The priest announced from his platform that they would now ask the groom to come forward and welcome him with a round of applause. A satisfied Lucas appeared amidst the applause. Next, it was the bride's turn, and she too was welcomed by all the guests. The eldest daughter of the Lopez family was far more beautiful than any of them had expected. Elena realized with anger that everyone was staring at Ariana, and it really annoyed her. She glanced sideways at the Duke to see his reaction. Dante was looking at the bride with a dark expression. Elena didn't understand why he was staring at her like that, as if he could explode at any moment. The priest asked the routine question, whether Lucas Pettigran swore to love his bride. "From this day forward, for all eternity, I swear," Lucas said calmly, looking straight ahead. Then the priest asked Ariana Lopez if she swore to love and respect her husband, Lucas, from this day forward, for all eternity. Ariana also answered in a confident voice, only she said, "No." "Very well, I now pronounce." The priest said, but didn't finish as he realized what had just been said. The guests began to murmur, discussing what Ariana had just said. It seemed the bride had said she did not consent. Lucas thought his dear Ari had just misspoken, as she had been nervous about the wedding all day. but Ariana firmly assured him she had not made a mistake. The priest asked if he could continue the ceremony. Lucas grabbed his bride's elbow and said of course. They asked him to continue. The priest hesitantly said that if anyone objected to this union, they could speak now or forever hold their peace. To everyone's surprise, a man wanted to intervene. It was the Duke, who announced that he objected to this union. Lucas looked back in surprise. Dante walked resolutely toward the bride and groom. He told Ariana that he was afraid he couldn't hold back any longer. These words shocked everyone present, as no one could understand what was happening. Even the employee from the Information Guild didn't know that His Grace the Duke was also involved in Miss Ariana's plan. Previously, the clerk had asked the miss if she planned to release the photos and cancel the wedding today. Ariana shook her head because she would cancel the wedding, but the photos were of no use. Ariana wanted Elena to sing this Siren's aria perfectly in front of everyone. That's when she would need the photos, and the song would cause a sensation when the public guessed who it was about. What the clerk didn't understand was why His Grace the Duke would risk his reputation to help Lady Ariana. Lucas asked Dante what kind of nonsense this was, because Ariana was his fiancé. Dante announced that he had decided a guy like Lucas was not worthy of Ariana Lopez's hand. He looked at the girl and said seriously that it was time to give him an answer. "Choose me, not this empty-headed fool," he suggested, assuring her that he would cherish Ariana more than anyone. "Ariana," Lucas shouted, asking if she was seriously considering this now. He was Lucas Pettigran, the man Ariana loved with all her heart. Ariana replied that she had already made her choice, which confused Lucas. She concluded that she could not marry him, and she said it while looking him in the eye. Lucas asked in astonishment if she was saying she was just canceling the wedding, right in the middle of the ceremony. "Yes," Ariana said, "because I would rather die alone than marry a man like you." She called Lucas a disgusting bastard who was having an affair with his own sister-in-law. Lucas couldn't believe she knew about it and wondered how long ago. He cursed because of all the possible days Ariana had a guest today. Lucas shouted that it wasn't true and that he could explain everything. He grabbed Ariana's hand, suggesting they talk in private, but Dante suddenly punched Lucas, knocking him to the ground. Dante told Lucas not to dare touch Ariana with his filthy hands. "Oh," the Duke said. Looking at the girl, he wanted to know what choice she had made, assuming she had chosen him. His hand wrapped around Ariana's waist, pulling her toward him. He said that even if that weren't the case, he would take her away from here at any cost. Dante said that the moment he first saw this girl, he had already decided everything. Ariana couldn't tell if Dante's look was just a well-acted performance. The Duke leaned in and whispered in the girl's ear that he had decided he would never let her go again. With that, he kissed Ariana in front of everyone present. The carriage traveled along a narrow road. Elena sat inside, listening in shock to her companion's curses. Her brother cursed nonstop, unable to understand how that pathetic girl could dare to do this to them. Thanks to her, the alliance with the Pettigran family was ruined. The guests left the failed celebration in shock, while Marchioness Pettigran had to be carried out on a stretcher. Now the Marquis might withdraw his investment because he was so furious, which was frustrating. With only a few days left until the premiere, it was unclear how, of all people, Ariana had eloped with Duke Heigenberg, and her whereabouts were now unknown. Could Ariana have somehow recovered her memories of what happened more than 10 years ago? Finally, the carriage stopped at the mansion's portico. The brother got out and yelled at Elena to get out immediately as well. "That it's useless," she replied. Someone like Ariana could never become the Duke's bride. The opera was scheduled in 3 days, and if this performance failed, they wouldn't be able to participate in the founding day celebration. Elena looked terrible, as if completely unaware that she was due to sing on stage in a few days. She asked her brother if he was really going ahead despite the fiasco, but it was important to state that Ariana's presence or absence would not affect the Lopez Opera House's performance in the slightest. When Ariana returned, her brother would catch her and force her to marry the Marquis, even if he had to beat her half to death. Ariana was right at home, saying nonchalantly, "Welcome home, dear brother." "You?" Elena and her brother shouted, at a loss for words. Ariana looked at them and smiled. Her brother yelled that Ariana, that pathetic girl, had no idea what she had done today. He asked how she dared to show up at home with that insolent smile. After such a scandal, Ariana replied that was exactly why she was packing her bags. She intended to leave this house for good. She didn't think it was surprising, as she could no longer live in this house. After the wedding, her brother asked if she meant she was really going to marry the Duke. How dare she say that? So he raised his hand to hit her. How dare this little wench say such a thing, do such a thing? Ariana used to be terrified when Edward got this angry. He made the girl feel as if her alcoholic father had suddenly come back to life. But now Ariana could see clearly that he looked like a complete joke. Seeing his sister's cold smile, Edward frowned. He raised his hand to slap her and demanded she wipe that insolent smile off her face at once. But Ariana wasn't going to take it lying down. She kicked her brother in the shin in response. Edward fell with a groan, clutching his leg, accompanied by the shriek of a startled Elena, while Ariana watched, remembering what her grandfather used to say in her childhood. The old man had always taught her to aim for the shins when attacking, not the groin, even against men. As it turned out, he was right. Ariana told her brother she wasn't going to marry Lucas, while he was still yelling at her for hitting him and being insolent. The girl asked if Edward wasn't curious why she had decided to call off the wedding so suddenly. The man, who had gotten up from the floor and was very annoyed, resentfully agreed to listen to his sister. Ariana revealed that Lucas had cheated on her. She added that it happened on their wedding day. When Elena heard these words, the corner of her eye twitched, and Ariana finished by saying the affair was with none other than her own sister. Elena exclaimed that Ariana was insane. Elena cried that Ariana thought she was having an affair with her own brother-in-law. But how dare she accuse her of something so vile? Until this moment, Edward hadn't known that Lucas had been having an affair with Elena. He couldn't say he hadn't expected this from him. He had seen the foolish girl try to seduce her sister's fiancé several times, and it was obvious Lucas enjoyed her attention. Now Elena shrieked with rage that her sister would dare to ruin her reputation like this, painting her as a promiscuous woman. She rushed to her brother, appealing to him to stand up for her. According to Elena, Ariana was framing her to cover up what she herself had done. Edward said he understood everything. The sound of the impact was very loud. Elena turned her face away from him. Come to think of it, I don't remember ever hitting you, Edward said to Elena. The girl trembled with fear, looking at her brother. Edward demanded she apologize to her sister at once, which angered Elena, as she believed she had nothing to apologize for, that she was guilty of nothing. Ariana watched this family drama, thinking that the slap was a huge surprise for Elena, which was natural, as her father and Edward had never hit her before because Ariana had always protected her sister, taking all the punishment herself, though she highly doubted Elena had ever thought about that. Now Elena was furious that Edward could say such a thing to her. Enraged by her behavior, Edward slapped her again. He ordered her to get on her knees immediately and beg for Ariana's forgiveness. Elena couldn't believe Edward was asking her to do this. Edward replied that if his sister accused Elena of such a thing, she could at least pretend to be repentant instead of talking back insolently. Elena smiled and asked for forgiveness, but Edward wasn't looking at her, but at Ariana. He understood that since Ariana had caught her sister and Lucas in the act, it was a reasonable excuse to leave, and now he needed to appease the angry girl. Edward thought that Ariana had always been a soft-hearted person, so now he just needed to make Elena kneel and beg for forgiveness. Thank you for this cheap farce, Ariana said with a smile. She announced to her brother and sister that, unfortunately, their audience time was over. The girl ignored her shocked relatives and walked toward the exit to close that door forever. Edward belatedly rushed after her, calling her name. He was surprised to see a hand with a sword blocking his way. Who the hell are you? Edward asked the person blocking his path. The stranger replied that he was under orders from His Grace the Duke to protect Miss Ariana from anyone who wished to harm her. Meanwhile, Ariana arrived at a completely different mansion, glittering in the twilight. The door creaked open, and Ariana walked in, thinking this was the Duke's residence. She had been told he himself would be here, but the girl couldn't find him anywhere. Suddenly, an unexpected voice caught Ariana's attention. It was the Duke, appearing before the girl. Ariana thought she had never seen him in casual clothes before, so he looked a bit unfamiliar. Dante's gaze fell on Ariana's face. What happened to you? He asked, and the girl didn't understand for a moment. He cupped her chin with his hand, carefully examining the mark left by Edward's slap. Ariana hadn't thought it would be so obvious. Dante said he despised any damage to his property, especially when it came to his woman. Was the Duke worried about her? Ariana thought awkwardly, but she felt not. It was more likely that this would somehow affect his reputation. Ariana quickly apologized and assured the Duke it wouldn't happen again. Dante looked at her and said that didn't answer the question he had asked her. Dante said he doubted it was Ariana's sister who did it. He suspected it was her brother. Dante remembered his name was Edward Lopez. Now he was going to make him pay. Ariana felt a cold sweat break out on her skin under the Duke's intense gaze, and she stammered, trying to explain that she had already kicked the offender in the shin. Dante laughed outright. He asked if the kick had satisfied Ariana's thirst for revenge, but the girl replied that it was just the beginning. However, she had to admit that the Duke had made the day much better, and she thanked him with a smile. Dante replied that he was glad she enjoyed it. He touched her face and said it felt good to know he could bring her pleasure. Ariana didn't understand why Dante was stroking her lips. She remembered the kiss and immediately blushed. She forced herself to collect her thoughts, knowing it was all just an act. She still stammered her belief that the last part would have everyone talking about today's events. Then Ariana bowed and added that she would do her best to repay her debt as soon as possible, Dante, noting that she did have a lot to repay him. Ariana was surprised that he said a lot. The Duke replied that was what he thought, that the girl wasn't pretending, but had indeed forgotten many things. Ariana had no idea what His Grace the Duke was talking about. What on earth she had forgotten. All right, Dante said, I'll give you a chance to figure it out for yourself. Try to remember. Ariana excitedly sifted through her memories. He might be talking about that old incident, but it couldn't possibly be related to His Grace the Duke. She must have missed something. These days, high society was abuzz with gossip and news. Ladies drank tea and told each other the details of the previous day's unfortunate wedding. It was an incredible sight, and Marchioness Pettigran, who had fainted and injured herself, now had to wear a cast. Few could have imagined that His Grace the Duke would ruin a wedding and take the bride. But the biggest mystery was how this girl had won his inaccessible heart. This was exactly what was being talked about in the mansions and salons of the capital. Everyone was wondering what would happen now with Her Highness the Princess, who also would learn of this news. The fact that Duke Dante Heigenberg had disrupted a wedding to personally take the bride had even made it into the newspapers. Everyone was asking, is this the woman for whom he abandoned Princess Katerina? Katerina read the article and memorized the name Ariana Lopez. The princess intended to meet this girl in person. Loud laughter echoed through the Lopez mansion. Edward asked Wilhelm if he was sure the ledger in his hands was correct. Edward jumped up and exclaimed, it was fantastic. All seats for the second and third days were sold out. Moreover, there were already rumors of tickets being resold. This was what you call a blessing in disguise, and the thought of it delighted Edward. The obscene scene created by that devil had suddenly turned to their advantage. Edward asked Wilhelm for the total amount, and the figure was 10 million Caden. The Lopez family hadn't had this much money even when Edward's father was the head of the family. Edward told his assistant to contact the best tailors and have them bring their catalogs, as he could now afford to buy himself several expensive suits now that he had money. Wilhelm looked at Edward with a strange expression. Just then, a letter arrived for Ariana. She learned that Edward had already ordered outfits to celebrate the sold-out show. Ariana smiled as she read the news about the unprecedented success of the Lopez Opera House. Her brother must be on cloud nine. Ariana hoped he would fly higher than any cloud in his ecstasy, as his fall would only bring her greater pleasure. For now, the girl had other plans. It was time, Ariana thought, to meet with her allies. First, she thanked the men for coming at her invitation. She apologized for not being able to pay much attention to the orchestra lately, and said she hoped the rehearsals were going well. But her interlocutors thought Ariana had no need to apologize, as everyone knew how busy she was. Ariana didn't have to worry. All plans would proceed as scheduled. On second thought, the three guests today were the stars of the Lopez Opera House Orchestra. Louis was cool, tall, and handsome, undoubtedly charismatic. Reuben was always angelically sweet, and Lorelei was especially popular among women, known for her special charm and friendly demeanor. The amount of charm in this room was simply off the charts, dazzling Ariana. But the girl resolutely pulled herself together, for since she had changed the future of these people, she had to do everything possible for them. She had to live up to the trust they had placed in her. Suddenly, a man ran into the room with a message for Lady Ariana. The carriage of Her Highness the Princess had arrived. The Duke was not at home, so Ariana had to decide what to do in this situation. Everyone was shocked that the princess would appear here. Ariana thought Her Highness the Princess had arrived earlier than expected, as everyone knew Dante was the princess's first love. Believing the princess must have come to see her, she gave orders to escort her to the VIP lounge. She then turned to a worried Ruben and asked him to play a piece for them. The thought of performing in front of the princess terrified the musician. But everything happened just as Ariana had planned, and soon, beautiful music filled the bright hall as Ruben played the violin for the two ladies. Sitting at the tea table, the princess remarked that although Ariana was a guest just like herself, she had clearly made herself the mistress of the estate. Ariana replied that she understood her position was an undeserved honor, but the Duke had permitted her to act on his behalf in his absence. The princess found this laughable, saying one might think they had already exchanged wedding vows. Ariana did not know how to respond. The princess thought grimly that the engagement must be real, and the Duke was indeed close to this girl. Not long ago, an article had been published about what happened in Elysium. The men the princess had personally hired to watch the Duke had been beaten by him before they could find out anything. The fact that they were engaged so quickly still sounded like utter nonsense, and the princess refused to accept it. Ariana said that she knew she did not have many strengths compared to Her Highness, and that a more elegant person was suited to be the mistress of this estate, someone like Your Highness. The princess did not understand what the other was thinking, why she would suddenly say such flattering words, but she was not wrong. Ariana began to talk about the delicate patterns adorning the princess's dress. Her Highness did not allow her to change the subject so abruptly. Ariana replied that she had only wanted to say the pattern was both beautiful and exquisite, but felt it would be presumptuous to praise Her Highness's dress. The princess suddenly opened her fan, covering her face, but Ariana had not meant to offend her in the slightest. The princess pondered the other woman. What was with her? Why did she have such impeccable taste? The princess now saw that, contrary to all the scathing rumors about this girl, Ariana's face looked like that of a chaste maiden from a noble family. She was so beautiful. The princess said Ariana had a keen eye, as she had drawn the pattern on this dress herself, so it was impossible to order the same one from any tailor as, "Oh, this is your work," Ariana exclaimed. No wonder the style felt so familiar. The princess was surprised that this near stranger knew something about her personal drawing style. Ariana happily explained that she even had an art book of the princess's work. The art book could only be work the princess had created while at the Indo Royal Academy of Arts. Her Highness became unusually agitated for reasons Ariana could not comprehend. She coldly ordered the other to dispose of the art book at once. This greatly surprised Ariana, who asked why she should do that. The furious princess shrieked that those were her works from many years ago, filled with so many mistakes that she herself could not bear to look at them. Ariana replied that perhaps that was true for the princess herself, but for her, those paintings were her only solace, especially the painting of the girl holding the dandelion fluff. When Ariana felt lonely for the things she could never have, she was comforted by the way the girl in the painting could neither let go nor hold on to what was in her hand, letting it fly away. Ariana admitted that it might sound strange, but she felt as if the painting understood and shared her sorrow. She smiled at the princess. That empty sorrow of wanting something unattainable was precisely the state of mind Her Highness was in when she painted it. No one had ever shown such a deep understanding of the princess's work. Princess Katerina told herself to collect her thoughts. This must all be some kind of scheme, and she could not forget why she had come here. The princess admitted that Ariana's eye was indeed keen and profound, but she was mistaken if she thought such cheap flattery could persuade her and win her favor. Katerina said she refused to stand by and watch Ariana drag Dante into an indecent scandal. She knew it was futile, that there was never a chance for her to marry Dante. He already possessed immense power, and if he were to also become the heir to the throne, the political balance of the empire would be thrown into chaos. Just then, the princess's attention turned to the music. She said aloud that this melody had been playing for a while. If Her Highness did not like it, Ariana suggested she could tell the violinist to stop. Katerina replied that she did not mean that. She just wanted to know the origin of the melody. "To be honest," said Ariana. The piece was inspired by a painting Her Highness had exhibited at the last Founding Day celebration, titled Two-Faced Joy, and this song was composed to express the melancholy in the princess's painting. Katerina could not understand what was happening at all, how this girl could so thoroughly understand her art. The princess asked how on earth Ariana had heard this song. Ariana replied that she had written it, which stunned Katerina, who could not believe a woman could compose such a melody. Ariana said it was true, just as the princess, a woman, had painted that picture. Katerina guessed that Ariana, upon learning of the princess's arrival, had deliberately had the handsome violinist play this piece. Now she understood everything. This girl had planned everything from the beginning to win Katerina's trust. She was furious. The princess said she would return another day, and after bidding farewell, she left, leaving Ariana with a puzzled look on her face. Ariana thought to herself that the rumors about the princess favoring flattery must be true, and now it seemed she would not oppose her plans for a while. But there was not a single lie in Ariana's confession of her love for Her Highness's paintings, and it was also true that she had composed a melody inspired by two-faced joy. Ariana sincerely hoped the princess would see her true heart. A few days later, a long line of people had formed. Elena walked before the crowd with a triumphant smile. Someone in the crowd greeted Lady Elena, saying she was as beautiful as ever and that they were looking forward to her performance. Elena thought smugly that what happened at the wedding had instead helped the Lopez family attract unprecedented attention. Every performance was sold out. Strangely enough, things had been going much more smoothly since Ariana disappeared, so much so that it felt as if all their previous failures had been caused by that younger sister of hers. Elena just couldn't understand why Mr. Lucas still insisted on searching for Ariana when they were doing just fine without her. Elena was sure that after the huge success of today's performance, even Mr. Lucas would finally understand who the real gem of the Lopez Opera House was. By then, she would become the next Marchioness Petrigon. With this thought, Elena entered the opera house, but her good mood was not destined to last. Edward was furious because not a single person from the orchestra had shown up, and he had no idea where they all were. Elena asked what he meant by the orchestra being absent. The performance was about to start. Edward replied irritably that he meant exactly what he said. Not a single musician had appeared. Elena exclaimed that it was impossible for them to be late on such an important day. She said it was Edward's responsibility to make sure they were there, even if it meant dragging them out of their homes. But Edward had already checked their residences and couldn't find them, as if they had all conspired to disappear together. Then Elena asked, couldn't they just hire someone else on short notice? Edward yelled at his sister, because no musician on earth could learn such a complex piece in such a short time. A man who had walked up to the Lopez siblings asked if Edward meant the performance had to be canceled. The man was Lucas Petrigon, and Edward hurriedly assured him that the Marquis need not worry, as he had found a pianist and they could manage. Edward grabbed his sister's wrist and pulled her roughly toward him, making her cry out in pain. Edward told Elena to get on stage and buy them some time. What did you say? Elena exclaimed. She didn't understand how she was supposed to go on stage without a single accompanist. But Edward roared in her face that she could do whatever she wanted, sing or juggle. He didn't care what she came up with. Listen here, Elena Lopez. Edward said he had invested a lot of money in this opera house, and he would not lose it all now because of someone's stupid mistake. If that happened, Edward might get very angry, fine, said Elena. She walked, trembling, onto the empty stage, surrounded by the whispers of the audience. As Elena began to sing, people started to wonder where the orchestra was, why the soprano was singing alone on stage, and perhaps this was some new form of performance. Elena continued to sing the aria without accompaniment. From the first moment I saw you, she sang the lyrics. But the audience said that the singer's voice was good, but it sounded too monotonous without accompaniment. They hadn't paid a fortune to listen to a soprano sing a cappella. Elena convinced herself that she was a professional and could handle the situation. She had to, because if she failed now, it was hard to imagine what Edward would do. Elena continued to sing the aria, but felt a chill. Just then, Elena noticed a man in the front row. It was Ariana, sitting there with a smile, watching the stage. Elena didn't understand what her sister was doing here. The audience noticed Elena's singing had changed, thinking she was off-key, and then the singer stopped completely. Elena thought angrily that Ariana had come here on purpose. She wanted to provoke her. That could be the only reason for her sister's presence here. It wouldn't be that easy, Elena thought, because Ariana's presence alone wasn't enough to make her lose control, because unfortunately for Ariana, Elena was no amateur. She would show everyone who they were dealing with. No matter how wicked these feelings, Elena sang, I will sell my honor. I will lose my morals, the aria's lyrics went. No, Ariana could never replace her. Elena was the only one who owned this glorious stage. Elena was born to shine in the opera, but at that moment, she saw something even more disturbing. They were photographs capturing her and Lucas in their most indecent moments. So Ariana had known everything from the beginning. Long before their ill-fated wedding, she had been watching Elena and Lucas, hiding behind a calm mask. Ariana was just waiting for the right moment to deliver the fatal blow. "What's wrong?" Ariana asked, looking at her sister, and commanded her to keep singing. "This is still your aria," said Ariana. But this was the harlot's aria, which Ariana had spoken of so passionately. At the time, Elena hadn't known why Ariana had such a triumphant smile. Elena realized, to her fury, that Ariana had written this song to mock her sister. After this scene, people began to leave. They said they had wasted their money after all the talk that this performance would go down in history. The audience had paid a lot of money not to see Elena alone, but to enjoy exquisite music. Now, some of them are going to demand a refund because the organizers couldn't expect the money to be wasted on a third-rate opera. When one audience member said this aloud, the others completely agreed with him. It was unacceptable that such a wonderful evening was so hopelessly ruined. The man said this, then pointed in the direction of the fountain, saying he heard someone was putting on a high-quality performance in Madeleine Square, and it was completely free. He himself hurried there and advised the other disappointed audience members to go as well. Madeleine Square? The man in the top hat asked his neighbor and suggested they go check it out too. Ariana hurried to Madeleine Square, hoping desperately that she wasn't late. The place she was rushing to was already very crowded and noisy. Everyone was surprised to see an entire orchestra in the square. It was unclear what it was doing there. The young singer with pink hair came forward. She was terribly nervous, not knowing if she was up to the task. Rosalind, a familiar voice, sounded very close, and the girl looked up. She saw Ariana, her mistress, and a smile appeared on her face. Ariana smiled and told Rosalind to do just as she had in rehearsal. They had a month to prepare. It was not enough by any means, but Ariana could say with confidence that everyone had given their all every day. The time and effort they put in were not in vain. The orchestra conductor looked back at Ariana and nodded. The performance was about to begin. Here, the sound of the violin began. The melody flowed, captivating the audience. The music was so beautiful that some of the women in the audience couldn't help but let out cries of admiration. "From the moment I saw you," Rosalind began to sing, "I knew you would ignite a forbidden desire in my heart," the aria sang. The audience wondered who this singer with such a delicate voice was, as they had never heard her sing before. Ariana thought Rosalind was doing a great job, but not long ago, the girl had said she wanted to be better than Lady Elena, even though it might sound presumptuous. Rosalind thought there must be a reason why Ariana offered her sponsorship, especially since the Lopez Opera House already had an excellent soprano. Elena. Rosalind didn't know all the details, but she had a guess. Perhaps Lady Ariana was trying to reclaim all the songs that had been stolen from her family, songs like Empowerment. So Rosalind intended to put her whole heart into this performance. She wanted to repay Ariana for giving her a chance. Avoiding prying eyes, I will bewitch you with my charm, Rosalind now sang. After all, forbidden fruit is always the sweetest. The audience was delighted by the singer's beautiful and penetrating voice, but was somewhat confused by the aria's lyrics. Even with my friend right by my side, her husband still catches my eye. The risk of being discovered only adds to the thrill, the song went. The audience understood that the heroine was saying she was going to seduce her friend's husband. We just have to not get caught, and our lives will be as pure as the first snow, Rosalind sang. One audience member was angered by such words. Can a lie really be pure? Cheaters always think they've done nothing. Why love? Entangle yourself with me, Rosalind cried out, reaching her hands to the sky. She sang of adulterous acts that took place in the garden, in the mansion's corridors, and even in the dressing room of the cheater's deceived girlfriend. The audience thought it was too vulgar to choose not only the garden, but also the cheated girlfriend's dressing room as a rendezvous spot, as if they were wild beasts unable to suppress their passionate impulses. But the song claimed that this love was too sweet to be considered a sin. but even if it is a sin, I will gladly accept a life sentence," Rosalind sang passionately. Edward and Lucas had also arrived at the square. They saw with their own eyes why all their audience had come here. This was Ariana's despicable trick, that shameless villain. Lucas was also furious that the song was clearly about him. After the aria ended, Rosalind thanked the audience for coming to their performance and then began to introduce their composer. Ariana's heels clicked as she approached the performers. Rosalind announced the name of Lady Ariana Lopez. Lucas thought to himself that Ariana would pay for all this one day. Ariana bowed to the audience, thanking them for their attention. But they all recognized this lady. They had seen her picture in the newspapers. It was Ariana Lopez, the runaway bride. Everyone was surprised that the song they had just heard was written by her, and it was hard to believe the talent of this lady, who was so young. Ariana Lopez, a shout suddenly came. It was Edward who had finally pushed his way to the front of the crowd. He rushed toward his sister, demanding to know how she dared to steal his stage. But Ariana only replied that she was surprised to see Edward and Mr. Petrigon here. "The word is return, not steal," she pointed out, looking her brother in the eye. "What? You little liar," Edward shouted, raising his hand to her. Edward was furious, believing himself to be the author of the song. People continued to whisper. They didn't understand what there was to return, what this girl was talking about. A chill ran down Edward's spine. Amidst all this gossip, he was pushed aside by Lucas, who was trying to get to Ariana. When he reached her, he grabbed the girl's shoulders and shouted, asking where on earth she had been. He wanted to know how he could be ignored after Ariana had humiliated him so. But Ariana replied that she didn't think he had the right to judge her. "No right? Ha!" Lucas responded, as he believed she never had the right to insult him like that. He shouted in her face that it was Ariana who had an affair, not him, and he demanded she tell the truth about when she first cheated with the Duke. Ariana said it was ridiculous that he was accusing her of what he himself had done. Lucas thought that after what she had done in front of everyone, the girl was still pretending. Lucas thought that Ariana had used this as an excuse not to let him have his fun with her, and then gave her body to the Duke. Now, she must be made to pay for it. Lucas leaned in toward Ariana and said he feared her life as a noble was over, as nothing ruined a girl's reputation more than betrayal. She was mistaken if she thought Lucas wouldn't notice she was trying to humiliate him again. But the song's pathetic lyrics weren't enough to do the proper damage. Lucas announced loudly that it was Ariana who had betrayed him with the Duke, and that Elena had merely been comforting him in his despair. The entire audience heard the Marquis's accusation as he questioned how Ariana could turn everything into a vulgar affair. Lucas said he had told her time and again not to be so suspicious. He claimed he had always known that Ariana would get angry if he so much as glanced at another woman, but he never thought her jealousy would go beyond all bounds. Lucas thought that as soon as Ariana found out about his relationship with Elena, he would visit her personal doctor and get a certificate stating that the girl suffered from paranoia and delusional jealousy. The Petrigon estate might not be what it once was, but it could still bring a minor noblewoman to her knees. Ariana would regret that she dared to stand in his way. He feigned concern and announced to everyone that he should have paid more attention to treating her delusions, as he cared so much about the condition of his dear bride. Ariana smiled and said that perhaps the story about paranoia and delusional jealousy was the best counterattack Lucas could come up with. Lucas didn't understand why the girl was laughing like that. Ariana asked the grim-faced Lucas to forgive her. It was just that this was even more pathetic than she had imagined. She explained with a grin that she simply meant she wouldn't have acted so confident if she had paid a gambling-addicted doctor for a certificate. Ariana said she really doubted she would spend her meager fortune on something so futile. For the audience, the news that the Marquis had bribed a doctor to make the lady seem paranoid was shocking. Now they were murmuring that the lady seemed as sane as any of them. Lucas shouted that none of this changed the fact that Ariana was having an affair with the Duke. She couldn't deny it because she was the one who ran out holding his hand. Ariana replied that she noticed Elena was not present, so she could assume the Marquis hadn't heard what she had. She was referring to the photos she had shown Elena during the performance. Now she would show the photos to the Marquis, throwing them in his face. Everyone could see the proof that she was right. Ariana remembered the law concerning divorce. If an event occurred that was sufficient to break an engagement, the wrong party had the right to a divorce regardless of whether the partner consented. However, no responsibility was borne for actions that took place after the event. Ariana slammed the whole stack of photos against Lucas's chest. She said that all this meant that from the moment her fiancé cheated on her with her sister, she had the right to be with whomever she wanted. Lucas looked at the photos with trembling hands, trying to understand how they were taken. He asked Ariana how long she had known about all this. People around them picked up the scattered photos, and in them, they saw direct proof that everything the lady said was true. It turned out the lyrics of the song were based on a true story. Lucas looked at Ariana's face and said she was a truly vicious woman. Now it was no wonder she disgusted him. She had only been pretending to be sweet and innocent, but in reality, she had been planning to destroy him all this time. Innocence was Ariana's only redeeming quality, but now she had destroyed it with her own hands. Lucas believed the Duke would soon tire of Ariana, as she was just a boring and ugly toy to him, completely unworthy of love. He asked how on earth Ariana had managed to seduce the Duke, unless she had offered him her body. But none of that mattered anymore. Just then, a man approached them and grabbed Lucas. It was Duke Heigenberg, who said he was not aware that he and Lucas had become so close as to forget their etiquette. Lucas trembled all over, not knowing what to say to His Grace the Duke. Dante squeezed his hand tightly and declared that those who sought his attention should remember that the closer one gets to him, the less polite he becomes to them. But since he and Lucas had become so close, Dante felt he had the right to give him some advice, pointing out that there was nothing more pathetic than a man obsessed with a woman who had left him. The Duke ordered him to stop pestering his bride. He pushed Lucas away with force. As Lucas began to cough, Dante told him to get out of his sight. Then he put his arm around Ariana's shoulder and invited her to leave with him. They walked away under the gaze of the crowd. Soon, the Duke's carriage was carrying them away from the square. Dante said that Ariana first got slapped and then just stood there letting that bastard insult her. Dante reminded her that he had already said that even if Ariana saw their relationship as a simple contract, she was still his future Duchess. By allowing herself to be humiliated, Ariana had also humiliated the Duke. Ariana looked at Dante and replied that she begged his forgiveness. She had remained silent when Lucas said those things because she was only thinking about how to turn his words back against him. The girl thanked the Duke for his help today. Dante replied that she didn't have to thank him. He had already told her to use everything he had, because that way he would feel no guilt when he did the same to Ariana herself. Ariana replied that she hadn't done anything that the other might find useful. That "Don't worry," the Duke whispered, leaning close to the girl's ear. He reminded her that what she would do for him when they were married would be more than enough. This left Ariana extremely confused. Could Dante really mean what she thought he meant? But he couldn't possibly. "Lopez," Dante said, looking into her eyes. He smiled, noticing the girl was already blushing. The Duke said he understood that as an actress, Ariana's imagination was very active, but suggested they try to keep it in check. Ariana responded indignantly that she didn't mean that at all. The next day was sunny, and birds were chirping near the mansion. Ariana couldn't wait to see what they had written about yesterday's events, and she eagerly opened the newspaper. There was an article reporting that Marquis Petrigon had been caught in an illicit relationship with the soprano Elena Lopez. It turned out the Marquis was having an affair with his own fiancé's sister. After Ariana exposed Lucas's affair yesterday, she had sent a small gift to the 3 most popular newspapers in the country. Among them were some particularly clear photos of Lucas and Elena's faces. Now she smiled. The articles were even better than she had initially expected, with eye-catching headlines and solid evidence. Suddenly, something else caught the girl's attention. It was a newspaper called the Morning Empire. It was the most prestigious publication in the country, and they usually disdained reporting on gossip, but this time they had published the article without any independent investigation. The entire issue of today's Morning Empire was completely sold out. The servant reported to the Duke that, thanks to him, everyone was now talking about the matter. Despite this, the assistant really wanted to ask His Grace a question that had been bothering him recently. First, the Duke had snatched the bride from the altar, and then he had unexpectedly asked his assistant to write an article for him. But in any case, His Grace's command had been carried out, and the special edition of the newspaper was complete. As for its impact, that was plain to see. Dante commented that it was an excellent wedding gift. The assistant expressed his surprise, saying he couldn't believe the Duke was genuinely planning to marry. But Dante calmly replied that of course he was getting married, Otherwise, there would have been no point in him snatching the bride in front of everyone. This statement greatly shocked the assistant. Was this really the same Dante Heigenberg sitting before him who had uttered those words? The newspaper reported a shocking twist. The lyrics of the harlot's aria were actually based on the story of its composer, Ariana Lopez. The accompanying photographs were truly startling, showing everything in detail. No one in high society could imagine Marquis Petherwin would do such a thing, as he seemed so respectable, and with a recently popular soprano singer at that. Everyone read that the harlot's aria was a true story about two people indulging in sinful passion in a garden, in a hallway, and in the dressing room of a deceived friend. It was simply obscene. The bell on the door chimed pleasantly. The heroine of the hottest gossip in recent days appeared at the door. Elena Lopez fixed her hair and greeted those present, but all the ladies demonstratively turned their backs on her. Elena couldn't understand how they dared to ignore her like this. She brazenly approached Lady Olivia and loudly complimented the lace on her dress. But Olivia shielded herself with an open fan, saying they were not friends at all, and it was rude to address her so casually. Then she turned her back on Elena. Elena thought to herself that this insolent girl had been begging for her to grace her salon just a week ago. No one spoke to Elena, but everyone was whispering about her, not as the famous singer to be admired, but as the woman who had an affair with her own sister's fiancé, with lyrics like "lies as pure as the first snow." The ladies simply couldn't believe the woman's shamelessness. Elena tried to convince herself to remain calm in the face of these temporary difficulties, but as the saying goes, every true star is accompanied by a few scandals. Suddenly someone called Elena's name, and she thought to herself that people were still seeking her attention. Yes, Elena responded cheerfully, asking what they wanted from her. The plainly dressed girl said she worked at a tailor shop on a nearby block and that they had not yet received payment for Elena's latest dress. Elena blushed and replied that it would definitely be paid for, that her brother would take care of it soon. The girl said that their manager requested full payment by the end of the week, but Elena responded sharply that she had already said she would pay. She slammed the door and left, and the ladies watched her go, whispering again. Elena ran down the street, extremely irritated, and the stares of passers-by only fueled her anger. She didn't understand what they were all looking at, and the fact that these people were treating her as a laughingstock was driving her mad. Suddenly, someone grabbed Elena's hand, and the girl gasped and recoiled. The stranger tried to hold her, and when the hood slipped back to reveal his face, Elena recognized Lucas. He yelled at her that she should be hiding at home, away from prying eyes, not parading around on the street. Elena replied that she wanted to explain things to people and restore her reputation. But Lucas was convinced there was nothing to explain, that the newspaper article had already spelled everything out. "Listen to me, Elena," he said, believing there was a way out of the situation. These words encouraged the girl. Lucas explained that there was a newspaper company he was on good terms with. Lucas could arrange for their reporter to meet with Elena, and then she must make a confession. She must say that she was the one who pursued the Marquis, as the only evidence, after all, was a photo of them kissing. Elena had to tell the reporter that she kissed him out of desperation from a passionate and hopeless one-sided love. The girl objected, saying her reputation would be completely ruined. She said she had a better idea, that they should confront the gossip head-on. When Lucas didn't understand what Elena meant, she replied that they could get married. She could assure the Marquis, with full confidence, that she would be a better wife than Ariana. Lucas just laughed at this, pointing out with a smirk that Elena was just a commoner. He never intended to marry someone of her background. Lucas reminded Elena that she seemed to have forgotten some circumstances, because although Edward and Ariana's mother was a count's daughter, Elena's mother was just a commoner. A nobleman could never marry a woman of low birth, Elena retorted. So, is it normal for a nobleman to sleep with someone of low birth? Oh, Elena, Lucas sighed, leaning in to whisper in the girl's ear that everyone should know their place and stay where they belong. Elena repeated to herself these words about the status and place where she belonged. This was the only way for them to survive together. The recent news was also being discussed in the mansion, how Miss Elena's tailor had demanded payment in front of everyone, forcing her to leave the salon in a hurry. Ariana's maid said that Elena got what she deserved. Ariana thought that everything was going exactly as she had predicted. It was likely that her brother and sister were already deep in debt from having to repay the huge sum for the opera. The maid had heard that a red-haired man had dragged Elena into an alley, and that it was most likely Lucas Petherwin. She was very curious about what they would talk about. A high-born nobleman embroiled in a sordid scandal with a woman from the lower class. Considering how much Lucas cared about his reputation, Ariana knew exactly what kind of things he would say. But the Elena that Ariana knew was far more unprincipled and ambitious than Lucas could imagine. Ariana handed a letter to her maid, Sophie, telling her to give it to Wilhelm when she returned to the Lopez residence. When a maid reminded her mistress that she also needed to change out of the dress she was wearing, Ariana replied that she was going to see His Grace the Duke. Sophie blushed and exclaimed that she couldn't imagine her mistress had such an important task today. The maid spoke with unexpected enthusiasm. The mistress had nothing to worry about and could trust her completely. The sun had set and evening was approaching. Ariana arrived at the Duke's private office and asked for permission to enter. She then appeared before His Grace the Duke in her new look, carefully styled by Sophie. Dante looked at her thoughtfully. It seemed Sophie had gone a bit overboard while dressing her mistress, but the excited maid could not be stopped. Ariana said she wanted to give Dante something. She opened the piano lid and looked at the Duke. Recently, Ariana had noticed that he worked late into the night and always seemed tired. When they rode in the carriage, Dante was always dozing off, so Ariana had an idea. This was the first song Ariana wrote as a child. Once, during a picnic, she suggested her mother lie down just like her. She composed a lullaby for her mother, hoping she would have sweet dreams. Her grandfather praised her, saying he thought they had a genius composer in the family. This was the melody Ariana, now, decided to play for Dante, although she didn't know if it would help him. Dante stood up from behind his desk and walked towards Ariana. He stopped her from playing, took her hand, and said it was very talented. Then he added that it was enchanting. Ariana's heart began to beat faster. She hoped Dante was referring to the melody and its effect. Ariana decided to ask about the article in the Morning Empire. She needed to know if it was His Grace the Duke's doing. The Duke asked why she thought so, and Ariana explained that she couldn't think of any other reason why such a conservative newspaper would publish such news so quickly. Ariana knew that these melodies didn't mean that much, but unfortunately, there was little else she could do for him right now. The girl had heard that soothing music like the kind she had just played helps with sleep, and if His Grace liked it, she could write down the sheet music for him right away in O, Dante said thoughtfully. Then he added that he would prefer her to play it for him whenever he wanted to hear it. Dante stated that on nights when he was troubled by insomnia, he might call for Ariana. He leaned closer to her neck and asked if Ariana was wearing perfume. Sophie had just told her mistress today that she heard scented hair accessories were now in fashion. Ariana realized that the maid had put her newfound knowledge to use when she did her hair earlier. She asked Dante if it mattered whether she wore perfume or not. Dante asked if she knew what scent it was, but Ariana wasn't sure at all. The Duke told her it was cyclamen, also known as the alpine violet. Ariana thought to herself that cyclamen grows in cold regions, and perhaps the Duke's estate was where it came from. Dante explained that in the language of flowers, cyclamen means an invitation to follow the one who wears it. It is also an invitation to enter his bedroom. Ariana thought that Sophie probably hadn't chosen this fragrance for that purpose. She wasn't that calculating. The problem was with Dante, who for some reason had decided to focus on these trivial details. No, perhaps it was because Ariana was always getting confused. Every time, she would ask for His Grace the Duke's forgiveness. Ariana admitted that understanding the language of flowers was a crucial part of an aristocratic education and apologized for her ignorance. Dante chuckled, saying he couldn't even imagine someone admitting their ignorance with such grace. The Duke noted that the revenge Ariana had recently orchestrated was clearly going well, and thanks to her, he was also enjoying himself. But he didn't forget to remind the girl that she had not yet paid for all the services he had provided. Ariana readily agreed and promised she would strive to play the role of his wife dutifully. Dante told them not to forget that starting tomorrow, people would begin arriving at the residence to prepare for the wedding. He intended to make Ariana the most desirable and beautiful bride in the country. "Stop being so unreasonable," Ariana heard him say. "Who knows, maybe I'll protect you like a rare treasure." In both Ariana's past and present life, this man was the only one who said he would cherish her. But now Dante smirked and said he advised Ariana to prepare herself well. "Yes, Your Grace," the girl responded. She said she would go now and headed for the door. But the Duke didn't let her go. He took another step closer and asked if she could remember what she had forgotten. Alas, unfortunately, Ariana's memory had not yet returned. Dante said she had better find a way to get it back. Late at night, Ariana slept in her room at the residence, moonlight spilling onto her bed. She slept restlessly, tossing and turning and moaning. She felt as if she were a little girl again, fleeing at top speed from an unknown danger. She had to run or she would die. But she tripped on a stone on the path, screaming as she fell. She had fallen hard. Very carefully, Ariana began to try to get up. Ariana started crying and calling for her mother. Then she held her head in her hands and called for her grandfather. Ariana woke up in bed with this feeling of terror, realizing it was just a dream. In her dream, Ariana had once again seen the day she lost her grandfather and mother when she was only 10 years old. Every time she tried to recall those events, a piercing headache would appear, forcing her to stop. But for some reason, she had dreamed of that day again. Perhaps it was because the Duke had told her to remember something, or perhaps Ariana had simply missed something important. During the day, at the Lopez residence, the maids were discussing gossip. No one could believe that Miss Ariana, whom almost no one paid attention to, would become a duchess. After all, everyone knew that in this house, Miss Elena had always been the favorite. Now that the topic had turned to Miss Elena, everyone immediately remembered that she hadn't left her room. One of the maids had seen Wilhelm go upstairs to see her. The girls looked up thoughtfully. Wilhelm did indeed enter Elena's room, saying he knew she had been in her room ever since she returned from the city. Elena replied that if he was here to lecture her, he'd better disappear quickly. Wilhelm guessed that she had met with Marquis Petherwin, and Wilhelm also guessed that the Marquis had advised her to take all the blame on herself. Elena admitted that he wanted her to say she had gone to him without his consent. He said that if she did, he would find her a good husband in another country. Wilhelm pointed out that once Miss Elena left this land, her life would be in grave danger, but the girl didn't immediately understand what he was talking about. Wilhelm explained that the Marquis was not the type to leave evidence behind, and he knew very well that if Elena died, no one would know the whole truth. What? Elena cried out in horror, unable to believe Wilhelm had just implied that Mr. Lucas was going to kill her. Wilhelm wasn't certain of it, but his words convinced Elena. Lucas had said he didn't know why he should marry her. He really could do that. Elena screamed for Wilhelm to do something, that she was a Lopez, just like Edward and Ariana, and how could their family's butler just stand by and watch her life be threatened? Wilhelm replied that he had no intention of standing idly by. He said there was only one way to be saved. At this time, in the Duke's residence, Ariana was actively involved in the preparations for her own wedding. She was studying a wedding catalog, and the milliner was watching her with curiosity. She couldn't believe she was face to face with Ariana Lopez, the Duke's famous lover. If she, Madame Evelyn, was chosen to make Ariana's wedding dress, she would become incredibly popular. She also foresaw a considerable income, as the Duke was known for his generosity. Ariana said that all these dresses were very beautiful. She chose the style she thought was most suitable. The only thing she didn't know was whether she could stay within the planned budget. Ariana remembered that they hadn't told the milliner about this. However, she pointed out that they had to stay within 50 million cardina, which to the milliner sounded like she could afford anything. Madame Evelyn said that the young miss didn't have to worry, as all the dresses in the catalog were cheaper than the price Ariana had quoted. Then Ariana said that wouldn't work for her, because the price of the dress should be over 50 million. After all, His Grace the Duke had forbidden the purchase of a dress that cost less than that amount. This limit was a minimum spend, not a maximum, but all the jewelry in the salon combined wasn't worth 100 million, and Ariana noticed that Madame Evelyn's reaction was exactly the same as the jeweler she had met the day before. Ariana had not expected to be made into the most expensive bride in the country, and she couldn't even imagine that the Duke meant it literally. She said she knew she was asking for too much, so she would go find another shop. Madame Evelyn exclaimed that they had silk imported from the East, which could be used to make a multi-layered skirt. They could also sew diamonds onto the lace, and the price of the dress would immediately go up. Ariana thought this trick might actually work. Madame Evelyn asked Ariana to trust her completely in this matter. The milliner couldn't let the biggest spender in the empire slip through her fingers because of some price restrictions. Ariana agreed, saying that she would look forward to the completion of the dress. Madame Evelyn noted that His Grace the Duke seemed to love Miss Ariana very much, and it warmed her heart that he cherished her so. Ariana chuckled and thanked her. Madame Evelyn said that after all the trouble the young miss had been through, the Duke had become her safe harbor. Madame Evelyn intended to find out everything about this story, all the juicy details of the couple's relationship. Ariana nodded, agreeing that the Duke had helped her a lot during a difficult time. Madame Evelyn decided to remember that the Duke had comforted Miss Ariana, and she guessed aloud that the most important thing for Ariana was a certain special occasion. Ariana replied that if her conversation partner was referring to her fiancé's betrayal, then that was how it was. She said that at first, she had annoyed him greatly because even though she knew about the betrayal, she still tried to marry her former fiancé. Madame Evelyn made a mental note that Miss Ariana's engagement had angered the Duke. Meanwhile, Ariana revealed that His Grace the Duke had saved her from a miserable life after marriage right at the altar. Although the Duke's methods were drastic, it helped Ariana come to her senses. She said that now she was sincerely grateful to His Grace the Duke for saving her. Madame Evelyn thought to herself that she knew it all along, that this was how it happened. The Duke comforted the betrayed woman and ended up falling in love with her himself. Perhaps to him, her sorrowful tears were like a knife piercing his heart. He risked his reputation to save her from disaster. Ariana added that, on top of that, His Grace the Duke did not speak publicly about Lucas's betrayal. He said he didn't want everyone to know how much pain Ariana was in. Oh, my goodness, Madame Evelyn cried, realizing that Miss Ariana might not have been telling the truth. In that case, the Duke would be the only one to bear the consequences of the interrupted wedding. It was a stunningly moving love story, and the heroine of this story was now sitting right in front of Madame Evelyn, wanting her to make the wedding dress here. In a fit of emotion, Madame Evelyn impulsively jumped up. The milliner declared that she would make the most exquisite and beautiful dress in the world for Miss Ariana, vowing to do everything in her power to live up to her customers' expectations. Almost burned by this enthusiasm, Ariana thanked Madame Evelyn. Madame Evelyn felt a surge of inspiration, and Ariana hoped the woman was good at spreading rumors. She had said the same things to the other merchants she met during the wedding preparations. She was sure that her version of what happened would soon be known throughout high society. If she was lucky, this would fill in all the blanks in her relationship with Dante. Until their contract was complete, the marriage needed to look like a perfect love story. The Heigenberg residence was filled with light and music. The guests were impressed that the famous residence was completely open for the wedding. The orchestra playing was the same one that had performed in the square. Many couldn't wait to hear their wedding anthem. Then, the wedding bells rang, announcing the arrival of the bride and groom. The main doors opened, letting in a dazzling beam of light. Oh, how beautiful the bride was, incredibly beautiful from her shoes to her ceremonial tiara. As she walked into the hall with the Duke, they were a radiant couple. Madame Evelyn shed a tear. This day was the best day of her life. Ariana's heart was pounding, and she herself didn't understand why she was so nervous, as this was not the first time she was getting married. The priest asked, "Duke Dante Heigenberg, do you swear to love and cherish your bride forever?" "Of course," Dante replied with a smile. The priest then turned to Miss Ariana Lopez and asked if she was ready to take her marriage vows. There was a moment of silence in the room. Then Ariana gave her consent. "That I swear," she said. "Don't forget, Ariana," said Dante. He turned to his bride and whispered to her that she had entered into all of this of her own free will. With these words, the Duke kissed Ariana, Amidst the countless applause and exclamations of admiration from the guests, the marriage was sealed. The beautiful music of the orchestra played again, and the guests could enjoy the food. The sound of the violins spread everywhere. Dante praised the melody as magnificent and jokingly asked who composed it. Ariana was unimpressed by his constant teasing. Dante replied that he wasn't teasing her at all, because everyone was very surprised when he said the music was composed by Ariana. Now everyone was looking forward to the performance on Foundation Day. Ariana asked in disbelief if the Duke really thought so. Dante assured her that he did, and then added that he himself was looking forward to something else. When Ariana didn't understand what he was talking about, he whispered to her that he hoped she hadn't thought they would be sleeping in separate rooms on their wedding night. Ariana blushed, not knowing what to say. Ariana, Elena called her name, appearing among the guests in a magnificent dress. She said her sister looked beautiful. She smiled and congratulated Ariana on her marriage, saying she was very happy for her. No one expected her to have the audacity to show up at this wedding banquet. The people at the celebration whispered that Elena's appearance was too shameless. They didn't understand how she had gotten in at all. Madame Evelyn rushed to intervene, asking what wind had blown this uninvited guest in, and wasn't Miss Elena Lopez ashamed to be here? Elena dramatically bowed her head and said remorsefully that she was very sorry. The girl was trembling, and Madame Evelyn asked her why she was trembling. "Ah," said Ariana, and ordered her to raise her head. With a demonstrative sob, Elena said she just wanted to congratulate Ariana, that she was only here for that. Ariana thought to herself that her sister's acting skills had improved greatly since their last meeting. She had clearly applied white makeup to her face to look pale and haggard, and had done her eye makeup to make it look like she had been crying for a long time. Elena assured Ariana that she really looked wonderful, that she wasn't lying, and that she thought she looked great with the Duke. The guests discussed in surprise. Did Elena come all this way just to say these things? This was unheard of, as almost no one would want to accept blessings from someone like her. With a pitiful expression, Elena said it seemed she shouldn't have come here at all. She just thought that once Ariana became a Duchess, they would never see each other again, and she at least understood that. Elena said there was something Ariana should know. Elena said she hadn't had the courage to say it before. Ariana asked what it was and told Elena to tell her. She wanted to see what trick her sister would pull this time. At that moment, an indignant young man joined the conversation, declaring that Miss Elena was actually the victim and that everyone had simply misunderstood the situation. This man was the only son of the Schmidt family, named Adolf, but Ariana didn't understand why he would take Elena's side. Adolf said loudly that there was something Ariana didn't know, that Miss Elena was the victim. The Duke pulled his bride closer. He said that today the bride should be the happiest person in the world. The Duke expressed doubt that Adolf's story was so important that it needed to upset Ariana on such a special day for her. Adolf felt the Duke's oppressive aura and couldn't say a word. Elena said to him that everything was fine, it just seemed her sister still didn't want to see him. Looking at the dejected girl, Adolf thought that she was very unhappy and that he must protect her at all costs. He clenched his fists and said to the Duke that his story was important. Adolf said that Miss Ariana should not be estranged from her beautiful sister because of the words of this lying man. Few people understood who the lying man Adolf was talking about was, but the young man loudly proclaimed that these words were about none other than Lucas Petrigon. According to him, it was Lucas who had pestered Miss Elena and confessed his feelings to her. Miss Elena was terrified by his actions, but she had no choice but to endure it in silence. After all, Elena was terrified that her sister would find out about everything, afraid that Ariana would be heartbroken by her fiancé's betrayal. This passionate speech was met with a rather cold reaction from the audience. Ariana looked at her sister and thought, after everything that had happened, did these people really think anyone would believe them? Adolf gritted his teeth in excitement. He claimed to have proof, as he and Elena had been seeing each other all along, and they had even gotten secretly engaged behind everyone's backs. This news had already caught the public's attention, as people were curious whether this engagement could truly unite Elena Lopez and Adolf Schmidt. Elena chuckled to herself, thinking how her naive and lovely Adolf was diligently providing her with an alibi, without the slightest idea that he was being deceived by her. Ariana suddenly approached her sister, saying she requested permission to give her a piece of sincere advice. She leaned close to her sister's ear and whispered that she would only say it once, so she should listen carefully. She said that this was not the best choice for her. Elena didn't understand what Ariana meant by choice. The Schmidt family, Adolf's family, was one of the wealthiest, noble families in the country, and Adolf himself was foolish and weak. A few tears and some hints were enough to make him drool, and Elena could easily get all his wealth. Ariana said it was a bad choice, probably just out of jealousy. So Elena laughed and said she had no idea what her sister meant. I see, Ariana said with a mysterious smile. She knew that Adolf was a good match for Elena, as he was the type of man she could most easily control. But unfortunately, she would soon discover that he had some very serious flaws, such as cultivating and distributing illegal plants, as well as persecuting and kidnapping others. All his crimes would soon be exposed, and he would go to prison. What's worse, the shipping company his family invested in turned out to be a scam, leading to their bankruptcy. First a sexual pervert, and now a future criminal. Ariana thought to herself that Elena truly had a talent for finding terrible men for herself. Elena sobbed and said she didn't expect her sister to believe her right away. She had always known that this matter bothered Ariana, that the Marquise was always kind only to Elena. Having said these words in front of everyone, Elena thought that if Ariana just waited a little longer, people would start to hate her instead of Elena. With tears glistening in her eyes, Elena said that every time the Marquise visited, Ariana made her remove her makeup and change into shabby clothes. Elena hoped that if she could win sympathy with a pitiful story, people would not remain indifferent to her. So she swore aloud that she had never thought of seducing her sister's fiancé. The audience began to whisper, discussing how the Duchess could be jealous of such a woman. But their voices held none of the sympathy Elena had hoped for, and her cheeks flushed with agitation. She looked at Ariana's face and realized she was simply mocking her. So this is your response to my advice, Ariana said, adding that now she understood everything. Elena asked why her sister was acting so strangely. Ariana asked if what Elena said was true, if Lucas had forced her to do all of this, including what they did in the dressing room. Elena bowed her head deeply and replied that she didn't remember at all what they did there, but yes, she definitely did not want to be involved in his affairs. Ariana noted thoughtfully that the Marquis seemed even more vicious than she had imagined, so now he should be punished. Elena hoped her sister truly believed her and said that there was nothing they could do, as the Marquis was untouchable. Yes, said Ariana. She knew they were talking about that special immunity, which granted the Marquis the right not to be arrested or investigated for minor offenses. Ariana pointed out that immunity was not without its weaknesses, and that even a nobleman could be charged if enough people voted for it. Ariana smiled and suggested that Elena report Lucas to the authorities, stating her belief that all the guests present would help her. Isn't that right? She asked the surrounding guests. Everyone seemed to start whispering with great enthusiasm. Someone wanted them to denounce the nobleman. However, it would be better to show one's good side in front of the future Duchess. On the occasion of his downfall, this was more important than clinging to bloodlines. Lady Evelyn was the first to volunteer her help. This prompted other guests to join her. Ariana smiled and pointed out that with the support of so many people, the Marquis wouldn't stand a chance. Elena was terrified and didn't understand what was happening, as she had never intended to do something as tricky as denouncing Lucas. She just wanted to change public opinion. Elena tried to remind Ariana that Lord Lucas was a Marquis, and therefore, opposing him could be dangerous. Ariana said that Elena didn't have to worry, as she only needed to look at all these people who wanted to help. Ariana declared that the truth would always come to light in the end. Elena and Adolf continued their conversation in the carriage. The young man thought everything was going very smoothly. He was glad that this vicious Marquis would now pay for all his crimes. Elena thought that without conclusive evidence, Lucas would not be punished and the investigation would stall. Adolf looked at the girl's worried face and thought that poor, lovely Elena had too much to worry about, and he had to help her through this difficult time. He assured the girl that as long as the city guard conducted an interrogation, the Marquis's reputation would be damaged. Elena felt that Adolf was right. Once the investigation began, Lucas's reputation would be severely hit. This was the only thing she could be sure of now. She snuggled close to Adolf, saying she was so glad to have him here to support her. Adolf responded that he would always be by his dear Elena's side. Elena thought that no one could have expected Ariana to suddenly help her. Perhaps after becoming a duchess, she had simply let her guard down, but something still bothered her. It was unclear how Ariana had managed to seduce that unapproachable duke who wasn't even moved by Elena's charms. Until recently, her sister had no connection with this man. Elena highly doubted that the two were truly in love. They had most likely struck some kind of deal. But a guess suddenly popped in her head. She remembered the sheet music Edward said Ariana had taken, the one belonging to their grandfather. Then Elena said that she had always thought her brother had said he hated the shabby sheet music written by that dead man. Edward asked if she knew how much it could be worth, as this kind of thing only gets more expensive over time. Edward exclaimed that perhaps if they wanted to, they could join the royal family. Now Elena understood. The only thing of value Ariana had to trade was Eduardo Lopez's sheet music, and that was likely the price for her to become the Duchess of Heigenberg. But Elena could take her place instead. That night, as Ariana was taking a bath, a glowing butterfly flew in through the window. The butterfly drew near the girl. Butterflies always reminded Ariana of a specific piece of music, the Fantasy Butterfly Trilogy. It was one of the most popular works composed by Ariana's grandfather, and the trilogy was already widely known during his lifetime. But unfortunately, after her grandfather's death in a carriage accident, the third and final part of the work was lost. Therefore, 3 years later, at the Founding Day celebration, Edward intended to present the third part of Fantasy Butterfly, the part everyone thought was lost forever. With this, he would be able to gain unprecedented wealth and fame. In other words, he was using the sheet music he found while sorting through his grandfather's belongings, and now he could elevate his own status. Ariana had managed to take a few pieces of sheet music with her when she left the mansion, but most of her grandfather's works were still hidden. Ariana thought to herself that she needed to get them back. Not just the trilogy, but all of his works. After getting out of the bathtub, Ariana wondered if the Duke had returned. However, after her bath, the girl felt different. She felt like a plant soaked in rose essential oil. Suddenly, something caught the girl's attention. It was a surprise prepared by the maid, who wanted to ensure her mistress's wedding. Night was perfect. These preparations infuriated Ariana. It was natural for a married couple to share a bed on their wedding night, and it wasn't as if she hadn't anticipated it. The Duke had already made his intentions clear that day. He said he refused to put on a show, that a clumsy pretense was worse than doing nothing at all. To be honest, Ariana suspected that nothing would happen today, because once 5 years passed, the rumors about the Duke being unable to share a bed with a woman would become insignificant. Since he had never denied any of these rumors, they were likely true. But a thought lingered in Ariana's mind. At the very least, the Duke definitely kissed women, and the kiss Ariana had received was surprisingly good. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Dante's voice rang out, interrupting the girl's thoughts. She was startled and exclaimed that she hadn't noticed him come in. Dante said that as soon as he entered, Ariana had lowered her head that, "Oh," she said, "that's because of guilt." The Duke asked why, and she replied that her sister had ruined his wedding celebration, and it had been on her mind all day. She thought that even if her apology was just a pretense, it didn't mean it wasn't sincere. She didn't know that Elena would use the wedding to put on a performance, or that she would even drag Adolf into this mess. Dante nonchalantly reassured her, saying it didn't matter, as that wasn't the main part of the wedding. All the most important things happened at night. Dante had noticed the passion Ariana had shown at the reception. He said, she now looked like a trembling rabbit about to be eaten. This piqued his interest. He wondered what kind of expression Ariana would make if he pushed her a little further. With that, the Duke kissed the girl. She knew this was all just part of her plan for revenge. But what was happening was becoming more and more appealing to her. Dante took her in his arms. Soon, Ariana found herself thrown onto the bed, with the Duke hovering over her. He kissed her, and the girl didn't understand why. Her heart was beating so fast because of his actions. "Ariana Lopez," he said. She had heard her name 1,000 times, but for some reason, it sounded so foreign. "No," Dante corrected himself. "She is Ariana Heigenberg now." He kissed her again. Ariana wondered what would happen if he heard her heart pounding. She had entered this marriage only to complete her revenge, but now, under the Duke's gaze, everything was becoming far too blurry. "I give up," Dante said suddenly. Ariana asked in surprise where he was going. The Duke replied that if he stayed, he likely wouldn't be able to control himself. His pride wouldn't allow him to share a bed with a girl whose mind was so clearly elsewhere. Dante told Ariana to listen to him carefully, saying he knew how pleasant revenge could be, and he was also very aware of how quickly one could become addicted to that sweet taste. Ariana thought about what she knew of Dante Heigenberg. As an illegitimate son, he had won countless battles. He had managed to become a duke despite the opposition of his elders. No one was better suited to talk about revenge than him. She wondered how he felt on the day he crushed all his enemies and reached his peak. Was he happy or lost? That's what Ariana wanted to know. Ariana pulled the Duke closer, wanting to know more about him. "Stop," Ariana thought, surprised by what she had just said. The Duke commented that if he didn't know Ariana, he would have taken those words as an attempt to seduce him. The girl stammered, tried to explain that it wasn't what he thought, it was just that she didn't know much about Dante. He smiled and said he understood what Ariana meant. The Duke touched her face again and said she needed to understand one thing. From that day on, she was living here with Dante Heigenberg. After that, they could figure out who owed what to whom. It was a sunny morning, birds were chirping outside, but Ariana hadn't been able to sleep a wink. Last night, Dante had told her that if he stayed, he wouldn't be able to control himself. She didn't understand what he meant by that. Perhaps he meant that he couldn't proceed to the next step. He might have been trying to cover up that embarrassing fact. Ariana thought that now was not the time to think about such nonsense, because her revenge was not yet over. Ariana still had a long way to go, and she needed to focus, and now she had a new debt. Dante himself had said that they would figure out later who owed what to whom. She remembered those words about responsibility. Making those who betrayed her suffer was Ariana's only goal. She wanted them to pay for everything they had done to her. She had never thought about what she would do after that, and now she had a new debt to repay. When all this was over, she would need to think about that as well. She couldn't even imagine what their relationship would become then. At this moment, this was happening in the Petrigon mansion. Someone was smashing plates while cursing. Lucas Petrigon was furious that she dared to marry another man. But at first, he thought it was just a simple insult. But Ariana was serious about ending it all. But no one could have imagined that Ariana would simply find a new master. Lucas could only curse endlessly. No, he just couldn't ignore this. After all, Ariana loved him, he was sure of it. Maybe if he said that Elena had forced him to drink a forbidden aphrodisiac, she would still believe him. It wouldn't be too hard to forge the evidence. He just needed to bribe a doctor. Some noise behind the door caught Lucas's attention, and he didn't quite understand what was happening. They were guards. They asked how the people here dared to treat them so rudely and disrespectfully. The Marquise answered them that the Petrigon family was one of the founders of the empire. Lucas asked his mother what was wrong. He wanted to know who these people were. One of the guards announced that Marquis Lucas Petrigon was accused of sexual assault, and they were here to take him for questioning. "Nonsense," Lucas said indignantly, reminding him of his immunity status. The guard explained to him that they were afraid his immunity was temporarily invalid, as the accusation was supported by more than 10 people. Lucas was confused as to who on earth would support such a ridiculous accusation against him. Unfortunately, the guard replied that they were not authorized to reveal the identities of these people. Lucas claimed he was sure it was a group of nobodies. However, the number of supporters exceeded 35. This number was unexpectedly large and surprised Lucas. The guard said that was why his lordship had to come with them now. "Let go of me," Lucas shouted, repeating it as he was dragged away by the guards. The Marquise lay on the floor, unconscious, and the maids whispered that she might not survive another blow. And so, the head of a noble Petrigon family, one of the founders of the empire, the elite of the elite, Lucas, was locked behind the iron bars of a dungeon. He thought of Elena Lopez, that wicked little bitch who dared to claim he had forced her. She would pay for her shameless lies. As soon as he got out of here, that flirtatious woman would start running after him. He intended to do many things, but now his thoughts about this place were interrupted by the clicking of high heels. Ariana approached the bars. The girl smiled and greeted Lucas, calling him Lord Petrigon. Lucas looked at her. He had always known Ariana was beautiful, but he never knew she could be this beautiful. If she had been smart enough to dress like this before, Lucas would never have noticed Elena. Ariana, my love, Lucas said, looking up at the girl. He asked if she knew how much he missed her right now. He was glad she was here because they really needed to talk. But Ariana only said that investigators were currently searching the Petrigon mansion. What? Lucas shouted, on what grounds? Ariana grinned and replied that the grounds were herself. She had told the guards that she saw Lucas sexually harassing Elena in the mansion. She explained to them that they would find evidence in the garden and on the roof. Lucas didn't think there was any evidence of what happened between them. Suddenly, he realized the girl had mentioned the rooftop garden. He tried to understand why she would mention that place. Ariana pointed out that indeed, no evidence of Lucas's infidelity would be found there. But that didn't matter. By a strange coincidence, Ariana's testimony would lead to the discovery of something much more suspicious. You wouldn't dare. Lucas shouted in fear. But the girl replied that she already had. She had found Lucas's secret ledger. Lucas couldn't understand how Ariana could know about the secret ledger set up for tax evasion, which even contained records of illegal slave purchases. Only Lucas himself, his mother, and his late father knew of the existence of these records. He asked Ariana how she found out. The girl just smiled at him smugly in response. In her past life, the Marquise Petrigon had forced Ariana to keep this ledger. The Marquise had wondered how Ariana could support her husband if she couldn't even get the small numbers right. Back then, Ariana could only apologize for her mistakes. I'm afraid you didn't mention the expenses, she had said one day. The Marquise asked if Ariana was trying to say it was all her fault. The Marquise had coldly said that she used to worry Ariana wouldn't bear her son and heir, but now she understood it was for the best. Their family didn't need foolish children like Ariana who would tarnish the Petrigon name in the future. The reason the Marquise forced Ariana to keep the books was distrust. She needed someone to pin all the blame on if something went wrong. Perhaps the day Ariana was hit by the carriage wasn't the day she died at all. Perhaps she had been dead long before that. Ariana realized how incredibly foolish she had been in the past. Lucas shouted that she was trying to tarnish his family with her blatant lies, but she wouldn't succeed. Ariana asked if he knew that the Marquise had been borrowing frequently from moneylenders recently. But to Lucas, it sounded like the girl was also trying to insult his mother. Ariana leaned closer and said that he must understand that even the Petrigon family's wealth was not eternal. If you only choose the most expensive things for yourself and buy everything according to the latest trends. Lucas couldn't believe her words. His family couldn't possibly be bankrupt. Ariana smiled and said he was absolutely right. His mother had chosen the moneylender with the lowest interest rates. The problem, according to Ariana, was that this company was a financial backer of the Dawn League, and the Marquise had no idea. The Dawn League was the very organization that intended to put the disgraced prince on the throne. One wonders what would happen if people found out that the family of one of the Empire's founders was being funded by a group of merchants. Lucas couldn't believe it, unable to comprehend how a woman whose only talent was composing music could know not only about the existence of a secret organization, but also about the Marquise de Petrigon's affairs. Ariana enjoyed seeing Lucas deny everything. She would make his impending despair all the sweeter. Lucas asked if the reason for Ariana's drastic change was because of him. It was he who told the girl to arrange everything. Lucas was furious with Dante Heigenberg because Lucas himself was the first to notice Ariana's talent. It was he who saw Ariana playing the piano in the corner of the room, flinching at every glance from her brother. It was Lucas who first recognized the girl's abilities. He gave her his love, and then this bastard showed up. Love? Ariana said thoughtfully. No, what Lucas gave her was not love at all, but more like a rotten fruit, tempting on the outside, but with nothing but decay on the inside. With those words, Ariana left, and Lucas could only shout after her. Ariana, he called, his hands reaching through the bars. At this time, in the Imperial Palace, people were discussing how such brazen behavior was simply unimaginable. Buying slaves, tax evasion, all of it was an unimaginable fall from grace for a founding family. Dante Heigenberg, the emperor, said gravely, "Yes, your majesty," he replied, thinking of the butterfly that had stirred up a real storm. The emperor mused that the Petrigon family was not what it used to be, but they still had the audacity to treat the empire like a fool. If the Duchess hadn't emphasized the rooftop in the garden, no one would have known anything. The emperor wondered if it was a coincidence. The duke replied that he was afraid he couldn't comment on that. as sometimes even he found it difficult to predict her actions. The emperor asked if he really knew so little about the woman he married. Dante replied that his wife was full of surprises, and that was what drew him to her charms. The emperor noted that the Duke was as evasive as ever, but there was no need to try and deceive him. He could see there was something between the two of them. Dante guessed His Majesty was referring to their passionate love, and the emperor exclaimed that talking to him was like talking to a brick wall. It had been 10 years since the Heigenberg family sent Dante to war against the barbarians, wanting to get rid of their problematic descendant. They had signed his death warrant. However, Dante returned hero. He was too capable to let things go just like that. The emperor asked if Dante had considered divorcing Ariana and marrying the princess. But the Duke simply asked if His Majesty was out of his mind. The emperor explained that the crown prince, though diligent, was too foolish, and the empire needed a strong leader. Dante replied that he would pretend he hadn't heard anything His Majesty just said. The emperor asked if he would at least pretend to consider it. The Duke assured him that he and his wife had already fulfilled their marital duties, and now he couldn't call himself a man if he was unfaithful to her. The emperor noted that Dante was good at keeping women, but there were rumors that the Duke had certain problems. Dante said he would like to know who was spreading such rumors about him. This conversation was interrupted by an imperial courtier who entered the hall. The courtier reported to the emperor that new information had emerged regarding the investigation. They had received an anonymous tip that the organization from which the Marquis of Petrigon borrowed money was connected to the Dawn League. The situation was becoming more and more absurd. The family of the empire's founder was being funded by a group of merchants. Meanwhile, the Duke's carriage pulled up to the main gate. Ariana was in the carriage, thinking that the investigators had probably discovered everything, as she had sent a letter detailing where the money went. There was sure to be a commotion for a while. The coachman told the lady that they had arrived. The carriage door opened. It was the Duke. He looked at Ariana and noted that his butterfly seemed to enjoy flying where it shouldn't. He said that since they were married, she didn't have to formally address him as Duke or Your Grace, and that she should not see her ex-fiancé again. Ariana explained that she just wanted to tell him in person that the family Lucas was so proud of what would now be known for its death. But the Duke asked if she was responsible for the anonymous letter. He noted that he had a strange feeling he couldn't shake, as if Ariana was always hiding something from him. Ariana said that His Grace was right, and that she was one of the people who sent the anonymous letter. She knew that if the Marquise's illegal private loans were exposed, the Petrigon family's reputation would be severely damaged. The Duke asked if this meant Ariana hadn't expected it to lead to the Dawn League being taken over. Ariana pretended she had never heard that name before. The Duke replied that thanks to her letter, they had discovered that the Frokin pawn shop was secretly funding that league. Ariana assured him that she knew nothing about it, and she had no intention of telling the Duke that she knew about the existence of the Dawn League. Ariana had only learned about the cooperation between Frokin's pawn shop and the Dawn League a few days before her death. So now it was better for her to remain silent. The Duke told her that such a major event had triggered a thorough search, and Ariana pretended to sigh, saying that Lucas had the worst luck and that she never expected a noble family like the Pedregins to fall so low. The Duke replied that it would have sounded more convincing if the smile in Ariana's eyes hadn't been so obvious when she said those words. The girl replied that it seemed she needed to practice the art of controlling her emotions. The Duke leaned closer to the girl, saying that she could be really charming sometimes. Then he said he would tell the coachman to turn the carriage around, as they needed to go to the imperial palace. When Ariana asked why, Dante replied with a mysterious smile that His Majesty wished to see the girl who had become the Duchess of Heigenberg. Ariana had no idea what His Majesty wanted from her. The girl respectfully curtsied to greet the emperor. The emperor noted that this must be Ariana before him, and that she certainly looked distinctly different from his daughter. The emperor asked if this was the type of woman the Duke of Heigenberg preferred, which confused Ariana. The Duke asked His Majesty not to make such comments about his wife, and the emperor commented that the Duke was being too talkative today. The emperor turned to Ariana again, saying that since her intelligence had led to the capture of conspirators intending to harm the empire, the girl needed to be rewarded. He asked if Ariana had any wish that he could grant. Ariana pondered what personal reward she could get from the emperor. She gathered her courage to speak to His Majesty. Ariana said that she would be greatly honored if she were allowed to perform at the National Foundation Day celebration. The emperor thought about it seriously. He certainly remembered that the unparalleled maestro Eduardo Lopez had once visited the imperial palace, arm in arm with his granddaughter. The girl was very young then, but the musician had brought her on stage with him. That little girl turned out to have a singing voice as beautiful as a nightingale's. It seemed she had now grown into a beautiful young lady. Ariana clearly remembered those happy times. That was indeed how it was. The emperor said that since Ariana had already proven her talent that day, she could now sing as much as she wanted. This surprised the girl, as she hadn't said she would be singing herself. But after thinking about it, she understood why the emperor had decided so, as women usually did not compose music or direct scenes. Ariana said that she was very grateful to His Majesty for being willing to approve her request, but the performance she was requesting did not involve her singing on stage. Her wish was to perform as a composer. The emperor did not expect the girl to say such a thing. This also deserved careful consideration. Ariana felt that perhaps she had asked for too much. No woman had ever debuted at the National Foundation Day celebration. Suddenly, there was a round of applause, and the Duke clapped loudly, announcing that the emperor had just earned 5 billion caden. The emperor did not understand what the Duke meant, and Dante explained that this was the amount he intended to pay after listening to the song Ariana had written. Since the girl intended to perform her masterpiece for free at the celebration, the emperor could actually be richer by 5 billion caden because of it. The emperor was sure the Duke was just exaggerating, as he couldn't possibly want to pay 5 billion for a song. The Duke replied that the value of a good song never diminishes, no matter how many times it is sold, and as the song becomes more popular, its value only increases over time. Dante firmly believed that the true value of art far exceeds the work itself. Hearing his words, Ariana thought to herself that this was exactly what she herself had always believed. The Duke added that he hadn't even mentioned that His Majesty could use this opportunity to finally pull the Enda kingdom down from their pedestal. Those unfortunate Enda people, the emperor muttered. They didn't even bother to hide their mocking smiles. He remembered those words about a lack of aristocratic flair, which he didn't fully understand. Dante noted that none of this was like it was when the great maestro was alive. The emperor exclaimed that of course it was all different. It was completely different before even the scoundrels of Enda had to bow to the music of Eduardo Lopez. Royal family members from all over the world came to personally plead with him to perform in their countries. Dante recalled that due to an incredible stroke of good fortune, the maestro's granddaughter was now standing right here before His Majesty. His Majesty's eyes twinkled, and he turned to Ariana. The emperor asked if he would allow the girl to perform at the National Foundation Day celebration if she could promise him that she would bring that despicable Enda kingdom to its knees. That I swear it. Ariana said decisively, promising to bring glory to the empire with all her heart. The emperor liked her answer and proposed that since the Duke of Heigenberg was so confident in his wife's talent, there would be no restrictions on allowing her to perform. She would be the last to perform at the celebration. Ariana thanked His Majesty and promised not to let him down. She thought to herself that it was Dante who had helped her. He had made the emperor see in her not a woman with no musical education. He had emphasized that Ariana was the one who had inherited the talent of that brilliant composer. If not for his help, things would not have likely proceeded so smoothly. Dante caught Ariana's gaze, and he leaned toward the girl, whispering that he would ask his lady to save such passionate looks for when they were alone. Ah, ardent young love. The emperor looked at the blushing Ariana and was moved. And at this time, a completely different scene was unfolding. At the Lopez mansion, an enraged Edward smashed everything around him, not understanding why he was still paying refunds, as he had long since fired all those useless servants who were sucking his money, and now it was unclear where the new expenses were coming from. He decided it was all because of that insolent boy who had stolen his orchestra. If it weren't for him and Ariana, Edward would have long since prepared a masterpiece for the National Foundation Day celebration and been sitting on a pile of money. The butler who entered informed the master that a guest had arrived, but Edward had already instructed everyone to tell visitors he was not at the mansion. But this guest was distinctly different from the others. The thing was, this guest intended to invest in Edward. Edward couldn't believe what was happening. He, of course, immediately saw the man. He asked the guest how on earth he knew of him. The stranger explained that he had been following him since Edward's days at the Ander Royal Academy of Arts. He said he had always believed Edward would grow up to be a great composer, but recent rumors of the Lopez family scandal had confused him. Perhaps he was in a position to help the family, but Edward just didn't understand how the stranger knew that Edward owed the Imperial Bank a large sum of money, and he asked for permission to repay this debt. Furthermore, he could offer performance support at the upcoming National Foundation Day celebration. He expressed his belief that a talented person like Edward would stand out even at such a grand event. For Edward, this was an excellent opportunity, as performing at the National Foundation Day celebration was any artist's dream. The guest said that for Edward, it would be a sure thing to dabble in the creative field and succeed. However, since the stranger was offering Edward a huge sum of money, the stakes were also incredibly high. He was concerned that this was the only way to get the right to perform at the celebration, and Edward was grateful for it. The guest expressed his belief that the distinguished guests would have enough discernment to recognize the artist's value. Edward agreed with this, as in his opinion, the only thing that had prevented him from spreading his wings so far was the ignorant fools around him. And when he finally had a chance to be in the spotlight, that despicable girl, Ariana, ruined everything. But it seemed that luck never abandoned a true genius. Edward noted that he and the guest had not yet introduced themselves to each other. He asked for his name. The guest smiled, shook hands with his interlocutor, and said his name was Leonard. In the morning, at the Duke's residence, Ariana heard the maid calling her. The maid rushed into the mistress's room with a new newspaper, asking if Ariana had read it. Ariana looked at Sophie with very sad eyes. The maid realized that her mistress had been writing all night again, and she had scolded her for it many times, saying it was bad for her health. But Ariana retorted that she was fine. The newspaper headline read that Edward Lopez's crimes had been exposed. Sophie asked if the lady knew that the servants of the Lopez estate had been kicked out without a penny. Ariana replied that it seemed the newspapers were receiving more and more various stories from the victims of her brother's hand. Ariana asked Sophie why she hadn't left yet. Ariana wanted Sophie to leave the Lopez estate and become her personal servant from that day on. Sophie happily asked if the lady really wanted that, as she herself would of course only be delighted. Ariana expressed regret for not being able to take the maid away sooner, but Sophie said there was no need to worry about it. Ariana asked if Sophie wanted to hear the melody she had spent all night composing. Ariana sat down at the instrument and began to play. Sophie stood by in a daze, feeling how wonderful it was. When she finished playing, Ariana asked her first listener which of the two melodies she preferred. Sophie replied that the first was exquisite, but the second was simply magnificent. The truth was, she couldn't choose which was better. Ariana said thoughtfully that it meant both melodies were mediocre. She explained to the confused maid that if both were beautiful, it probably meant both were unremarkable. Sophie exclaimed that she didn't mean that at all. She really just liked them both. She couldn't express her feelings in any way, and she wished more than ever that she had a richer vocabulary. Ariana murmured that it wasn't enough for it to just sound good. Her work had to be so powerful that people would understand as soon as they heard it that this was it. The piece had to melt the listeners' hearts with its flame. This was exactly the kind of music Grandpa would have written, but Ariana couldn't achieve the ideal. Sophie was the first to notice what was happening outside the window. She told her mistress that the merchant's carriages had arrived, and she guessed that His Grace the Duke wanted to buy more dresses and jewelry for his wife. Ariana sadly thought about how much time it would take to try on dresses in such a short time before the National Foundation Day celebration. The butler informed her that the Duke of Heigenberg had summoned instrument merchants for the lady, so she should go out and meet them. Ariana suddenly realized he had said instrument merchants. The butler explained that he had asked them to arrange their goods in the music room and confirmed if there was anything amiss. Ariana beamed with joy, saying she would be right down. She immediately lifted the hem of her dress and ran down the stairs at full speed. She couldn't believe there were instrument merchants here. The girl's heart pounded as she opened the door to the music room. Pianos, violins, and cellos were all placed on special stands there. Ariana felt as if all the musical instruments in the world were gathered here. In her past life, Ariana believed that one piano was enough to compose music. Lucas had told her that she should be grateful to be able to compose her own music on this fine instrument he had found for her. The truth was, Ariana really wanted to believe him, to be grateful for his care and love. The reason she was so focused on the piano was because it was the only instrument she was allowed to play freely. As for the others, she could only imagine what they sounded like. Now, all these magnificent instruments that she could own appeared before the girl. Here was a harp, its unique sound making it my grandfather's favorite instrument. The harp was the first thing Ariana's father sold after her grandfather's death. She thought she had forgotten how to play it, but it seemed the body remembered everything. Impressive, a voice suddenly said behind Ariana. Dante had entered the room unnoticed and now said that he had never doubted that his young wife also possessed this instrument. Ariana thought to herself that he had bought such expensive instruments without even knowing if Ariana could play them. She explained that she was not a professional, but her grandfather had taught her to play most instruments. The Duke noted that she was indeed talented in many ways. Dante moved closer, adding that this was exactly what was expected of his wife. The Duke looked into the girl's eyes and asked what else she could do. He suggested that perhaps she could also sing. Ariana's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't understand why he was suddenly asking her this. Was it because of what His Majesty had said that day? The Emperor had said that it seemed the little girl with the nightingale's voice had turned into a beautiful young lady. Ariana was completely unsure if she could do it, as she hadn't sung a single note since that day. She clenched her fists and said she would try. If this was considered compensation for the expensive instruments, the price seemed rather low. But when Ariana tried to sing, she felt a tremor, her breath caught, and she couldn't take another breath. Dante rushed to the girl's side to support her. He said she was trembling like a leaf and then asked if she was okay. The Duke said she didn't have to sing if she didn't want to. Dante told her never to force herself to do anything that she didn't want to do. Ariana explained that it wasn't because she disliked singing, she used to enjoy it. Dante said he knew. Ariana didn't understand what he was talking about, and the Duke asked her to tell him what was wrong. The girl decided to tell him about her debutante ball when she was 15. On the day of her performance, everything went wrong for some reason. The audience said her singing would undoubtedly be wonderful, being the only granddaughter of Eduardo Lopez. People simply couldn't wait for the performance to begin. The song was in an impossibly high key from the very beginning, and it was so loud that it could be heard from far away. Despite this, Ariana managed to sing, and then suddenly she felt her throat tighten and she couldn't breathe. Ariana collapsed on the floor, clutching her neck, and the audience began to talk about her illness, worrying that it might be contagious. Ariana had always had a severe allergy to oysters, and her symptoms that day were as if she had eaten a whole bucket of them. They angrily asked what she had eaten the day before, scolding her for daring to get herself into such a state, accusing her of not even being able to imagine how disgusting it all looked. Edward screamed that all she had to do was perform well, but she couldn't even do that, and she had tarnished their family's musical legacy. According to her brother, Ariana had made their family a laughingstock. Ariana only realized later that Elena had given her a glass of juice before she went on stage. Now Ariana thought that it was her sister who had put something in her drink. Dante said that the more he heard about her family, the more he hated all of them. Ariana felt that the Duke was angry on her behalf. No one had ever done that for her before, and now her heart was beating a little strangely. The girl apologized for complaining about her problems. She understood that it all happened a long time ago, and she wanted to assure him that it wouldn't happen again, but tears prevented her from finishing. Dante pulled her closer, telling her to save her strength for others, because it was no use to him. He told her to stop crying. He wouldn't make her sing again if she didn't want to. They didn't have to pretend to be a loving couple now, as no one could see them. There was no one around, and yet he continued to kiss her very tenderly. That night, Ariana was already in bed, but she was trying in vain to pull herself together. She shouldn't have reacted to the Duke like that. She needed to focus on her work. Besides, the Duke had probably done something similar countless times, which was probably why he was so skilled at it. Ariana couldn't stop thinking about those kisses. Dante himself had stopped and moved away from the girl. He said he had been trying to hold back until she remembered but her amnesia was upsetting him, and it was beginning to feel like a form of torture. Ariana didn't know that a person with such pain would react this way. There were many unclear things about this situation. However, it was time for Ariana to sleep. She dreamed of that terrible night, and she heard a voice calling her. But she ran through the darkness with her last ounce of strength, and her terrible pursuer was not far behind her. Ariana managed to scream before she tripped. She fell into the water with a splash and began to sink into the depths. There was someone nearby. Someone grabbed her. She heard a firm voice say very close by, "Wake up." That voice called to her again. That gloomy forest. It was the second time the girl had this dream, and it was more than just a nightmare. Perhaps it was related to those lost memories that his Grace the Duke had reminded him of. Ariana couldn't get the image of that forest out of her head. This was it. It suddenly occurred to her. She thought she had found the answer. Now she knew that people would only remember music that touched their emotions as soon as they heard it. Similarly, scary stories disturb sleep more than beautiful fairy tales, and nightmares stay in the mind much longer than happy dreams. The chilling magic of the forest from a nightmare will stay in your memory for a longer time. Soon, all the talk was centered on the ball hosted by Count Lopez. After all, it was he who had recently fired his servants due to bankruptcy. But it was said that he had paid off his debts in one lump sum. So the whole society gathered at his ball to confirm if this was true. A young man suggested that everyone had come for a special gift. No one knew what special gift was being discussed. "Oh wow," the young man exclaimed when he received the program. In his hands was an excerpt from a song composed by the late Count Eduardo Lopez himself. The guests were amazed that such a treasure was being handed to them. The melodies on their programs were all different with different titles, and it looked very interesting. Edward tapped his glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. He said he could see that the guests were enjoying the surprise. It had been almost 10 years since his grandfather's death, and for him, these gifts were an opportunity to share the memory of an extraordinary genius with others. Some might say Edward was recklessly squandering a precious legacy, but he himself did not think so. If he kept it to himself, then only the Lopez family would mourn their grandfather. But if he shared this music, then the memory of him would live on in the hearts of others. Therefore, Edward announced that he would perform the third part of the Butterfly Fantasy Trilogy at the upcoming National Foundation Day celebration. The audience couldn't believe what they were hearing about the Butterfly Fantasy Trilogy, the last masterpiece composed by the great maestro. It turned out he was really working on the third part before he died. Edward said that since Eduardo Lopez unfortunately could not finish the piece before his death, he had finished it himself. Although he was no match for his grandfather, he hoped the guests would enjoy it. To enhance the reputation of the Lopez family, Edward had to be the center of attention at the celebration. Just then, someone announced the arrival of the Duchess of Heigenberg. Elena rushed towards Ariana with a cry of joy. She said loudly that she was so glad she had come and hugged her tightly in gratitude. Ariana responded awkwardly to the gesture. The guests began to whisper that the sisters seemed to have a good relationship, which meant that Elena's claims about Lucas Petrie gun were true. Elena thought to herself that it seemed her role as a victim had not been in vain. Since Ariana had come here, it meant she believed it too. Elena looked around and asked where his Grace the Duke was, but Ariana replied that she had come alone. Elena thought to herself that he had long since grown tired of an Ariana like that, but she verbally asked why her sister had come alone and that it would have been better to come with her husband. After all, this was Ariana's first public appearance as the Duchess of Heigenberg. Ariana knew Elena would say that, and she replied that she had just come to visit her family, which could hardly be called an entry into high society. Elena agreed that she was probably right, and Ariana noticed the tiara she was wearing. Ariana noted that the tiara belonged to her. She said she was glad her sister was wearing it. Elena always liked to use her things and her men. Elena's face flushed with anger and shame. "Ariana!" Edward screamed, running up to his sister. He couldn't believe this thief dared to show her face here again. The guests began to whisper even louder. Edward declared that Ariana's presence was an incredible surprise to him, as he hadn't even sent her an invitation, thinking she would be too busy. And Ariana replied that she could always find time for protection. She intended to protect her grandfather's work, as she didn't understand how Edward could think of disposing of his music in this way. Edward vehemently protested that he was in charge of the Lopez family's property, and Ariana, no longer a Lopez, had no right to interfere. Ariana said that then Edward should give her a gift just like everyone else. Even if she was no longer a Lopez, she was still one of the guests. Edward ordered for the program to be given to the Duchess. The butler handed Ariana a sheet of music. Ariana unfolded it and looked at what was written on it. Elena noted with a smile that there was even some kind of drawing on this sheet of paper. Ariana said that it was her. On the edge of the sheet music, there was a drawing of a girl with braids just like Ariana used to wear. The guests understood from this conversation that it seemed the Duchess was very close to the late Count Eduardo. It was all so sad, and they felt very sorry for the Duchess. A guest approached Ariana, saying that the paper she had received also had a drawing of a girl with braids, and Ariana confirmed that it was her. The guest handed the paper to Ariana and asked for permission to return it to her, saying that if she had known it was so important to her, she would never have taken it. Other guests also began to hand their music fragments to Ariana, and the girl apologized to them, as she had no intention of making them feel guilty. No one understood why Count Lopez had given this to the guests. Because of him, they had upset the Duchess. Hearing this, Edward thought to himself that Ariana was still a vile and despicable viper. He approached his sister and asked if he could talk to her. They went into an empty room, and after the door slammed shut, Edward screamed that he didn't understand what the hell Ariana was up to. Ariana said that she should be the one asking him how he could distribute their grandfather's work as if he were handing out cheap flyers. She asked if Edward had hidden the Butterfly Fantasy trilogy. It seemed Ariana was really angry, and Edward had never seen her so emotional. It seemed he had managed to touch a nerve. Edward claimed he hadn't hidden anything anywhere. He was the master of this house, and all the property belonged to him. Ariana guessed he meant that he also owned that same score. Edward didn't understand what score she was talking about. Ariana screamed at him to stop pretending, because he knew very well that the Butterfly Fantasy trilogy was not his last work. Ariana was talking about his real final masterpiece, the score he was working on before he died. Edward thought about it. He knew nothing about his grandfather's last true masterpiece. So this was what Ariana was looking for. The old geezer had always favored her over anyone else, and now it seemed he had even written a song for her. He could pretend to have the score, then find out more information so he could search the house properly. "Ah," he said, "we're talking about that score." Then he assured her that he had it, of course. Ariana screamed that it was hers, so Edward had to give it to her, because her grandfather had written it based on the first melody she had composed. It was her music. If he didn't give it to her, she would find it herself. "Get back." Ariana screamed. She was about to check the safe in the office herself, but Edward declared that there was nothing there. Ariana tried to push him away, shouting that she wanted to check everything herself, including the safe and the secret compartment inside it. Edward was somewhat curious to learn that there was such a secret compartment in the safe. Ariana recognized that look in his eyes. It was the same one he had every time he stole her sheet music, the look of a greedy thief. But this time, greed would be his downfall. Just then, the guests saw Duke Heigenberg striding through the festival hall with a determined gait. Dante declared that he had heard his wife was nearby and hoped someone could tell him where to find her now. The crowd began to whisper, wondering where the Duchess had gone. Hadn't she gone to speak with the Count? The Viscount suggested they go look for her. Elena couldn't believe the Duke had actually come for Ariana. The Viscount rushed up to the Duke, assuring him it was an honor to see his grace again. But the Duke cut off his effusive words, replying that unfortunately he was in no mood for pleasantries, because it had been several hours since he had last seen his wife. The guests began to murmur, saying that everyone had rumored the Duke was cold to his wife, but it seemed those rumors were false. Well then, the Duke said, his heavy hand landing on the Viscount's shoulder. He wanted to know where his wife was, and the Viscount replied that the Duchess had gone out to have a private conversation with Count Lopez. Privately, Dante repeated very sternly, striking fear into the heart of the man he was speaking to. Just then, the butler approached His Grace the Duke and offered to lead him to the Duchess. Edward and Ariana heard a series of urgent knocks on the door. Edward shouted that they weren't finished talking yet, but this did nothing to stop the person trying to break in. Duke Heigenberg appeared at the door and asked if this was his pathetic brother-in-law. Ariana looked into the Duke's eyes in terror. His gaze frightened her. The Duke grabbed Edward and roared, "How dare he make his wife cry?" Edward had thought the Duke hated his own wife. Wasn't that why he kept her locked up at home? But the Duke's current behavior was definitely not what Edward had expected. Dante growled that from now on, he advised Edward to be careful when speaking to Ariana. His wife might be magnanimous enough to let her brother's minor offenses slide, but the Duke himself would not. Yes, Edward murmured in terror. The Duke and Duchess walked side by side through the hall. Ariana asked what had brought his grace here, and Dante replied that her words had hurt his heart. His hand wrapped around Ariana's waist, pulling her toward him. Dante said she had left him no choice but to come here himself. Ariana heard everyone whispering about the loving look in the Duke's eyes as he gazed at his wife, a look that made even the onlookers blush. Ariana said she had intended to return before dark. Of course, Dante said with a smile, reminding Ariana that she still had to play for him one more time today. They returned to the estate. The butler greeted Duke and Duchess Heigenberg. The maid asked if she should prepare a bath for the mistress. Ariana thanked her and said she planned to go straight to the music room. Sophie said that for some reason she had thought as much. Then, the maid saw that the Duke was also going with Ariana. All the servants in the estate gathered to watch the scene. In the music room, Ariana immediately sat down at the piano while Dante settled onto the sofa. When the girl asked if he intended to sit there the whole time, the Duke said he did. Ariana reminded him that she had already told him she couldn't concentrate with him in the room. Liar, Dante said, pointing out that once Ariana started playing, she would forget he was even there. He's just making excuses again, she thought to herself. She had to concentrate, had to ignore him. She had a lot of work to do. For the past month, Ariana had been composing this piece, but there was one part she wasn't satisfied with. It was a scene where the main character, a little girl, was immersed in a festive atmosphere. The passage was supposed to sound fun and elegant, but at the same time, a little strange and eerie. Feeling joy and an all-consuming excitement for the first time in one's life. That's a special moment. Dante looked at her with a probing gaze. He approached her and asked what problem she was having. Ariana replied that she couldn't convey the necessary emotion. People say that extreme happiness and sadness can be the same feeling, and that was exactly what she wanted to convey. Dante asked if she wanted to know how to feel something so good it makes you want to cry. Ariana felt that was a little different from what she had just said. Dante leaned in toward her, saying that if she was willing, he would teach her everything, that he would do everything in his power to help her. Ariana was frustrated that she was completely powerless before him when he teased her. She asked if he was really familiar with these emotions. Dante replied that, of course, he was much more familiar with them than she was, and besides, he was older. She asked him to teach her, if he could. Ariana whispered that she wanted to know what it was like to feel that emotion. Her heart pounded wildly as Dante moved closer to her. The next moment, the Duke kissed the girl. At the Lopez residence, Edward was also troubled. Mr. Leonard, visiting again, guessed that the Count must be quite annoyed. He had heard that Edward planned to perform the Butterfly Fantasy Trilogy at the festival. Edward said that, of course, it would be a premiere and an absolute success, and Mr. Leonard had nothing to worry about. What a shame, said Mr. Leonard. Edward didn't understand what he was getting at. Mr. Leonard said that he had been hoping Edward would perform his own composition. Edward thought so himself. He had been racking his brains over it for 3 days, but for a creator with a sensitive soul, there was nothing worse than a tight deadline. Edward said he was sure the festival guests would love it, but Mr. Leonard said he was sorry. But if Edward intended to play this particular piece, then he would withdraw his sponsorship. Mr. Leonard explained that he intended to support Edward, not some old man long dead and buried. He demanded the return of all the money he had lent by the previously agreed upon deadline, then turned to leave. Edward tried to stop him, grabbing his elbow. He said that in that case, he would perform his own work. After this conversation, Edward slammed the door to his office shut. He paced back and forth in his office, thinking about Ariana's words. If she was to be believed, there was another hiding place. Behind the safe. In desperation, he knelt before the safe, unable to solve the problem. The butler found him and asked what the master was doing. Edward spun around abruptly. He guessed that since the butler was so calm, he must know about the secret compartment. He shouted that no one was to keep secrets from him, the head of the house, and punched him. The butler replied that it only contained Mr. Eduardo's personal belongings, nothing of any particular value. "Open the safe or die," Edward said sternly, adding that the butler had better choose wisely, because he wouldn't make his death a quick one. The butler said he would open the secret compartment for his master. Edward said that was a good decision and ordered him to do it quickly. The butler pressed a secret mechanism on the safe door. The mechanism engaged and the secret compartment clicked open. "Get out of the way," Edward roared, rushing toward the compartment. There really was sheet music inside, the final masterpiece of the great maestro. Edward's heart began to pound. Perhaps this was even more valuable than the Butterfly Fantasy trilogy. Meanwhile, at Duke Heigenberg's estate, Dante sat by the window in his office, thinking of Ariana. She just needed to find inspiration, to feel emotions she had never experienced before. How reckless. Just then, Mr. Leo knocked on the door, and the Duke gave him permission to enter. He came in and reported that he had just completed the task His Grace had assigned him. Sure enough, as soon as I said I would only sponsor his own work, Edward immediately changed his mind, declaring he would perform his own composition at the festival. Leonard said Edward seemed very confident. Leo was genuinely surprised by Lady Ariana's intelligence. The Duchess had perfectly predicted the enemy's actions. He was also impressed by her determination in executing the plan. He guessed she could be an excellent military strategist. Dante grimly told his assistant not to waste time on such nonsense and asked if that was all he had to say. Leo brought up the members of the Dawn Alliance they had been hunting. The ones who fled after their connection to the Froken pawnshop was exposed. This morning, they had managed to capture one of them alive, only he had said some rather strange things. He said that a team of mercenaries was indeed sent to Fargi Forest that night, but he wasn't among them. Leonard said the Duchess had no reason to seek revenge on him. This was very strange. Ariana's maternal grandfather and mother had died in an accident in Fargi Forest. The Dawn Alliance went to Fargi on an assassination mission, thinking it would provoke Ariana to seek revenge on them. It turns out they were murdered, and it was definitely on someone's orders. Leo asked if they should tell Lady Ariana about this, but the Duke replied, not yet. He also ordered everyone to be warned not to touch him. But Leo objected, saying they had gotten almost nothing out of him. The Duke replied that from now on, he would interrogate the man himself. The day of the founding festival had arrived. The stream of carriages seemed endless, which was perfectly understandable, as the founding festival was the pride of the empire. The people from the kingdom of Enda looked so distinctive that one could imagine the same attire becoming all the rage among the capital's residents next year. A young man stepped out of carriage and was immediately recognized as the eldest prince of the kingdom of Enda. Many had heard of his mastery of the arts, but few knew he was so handsome. Suddenly, everyone's attention was drawn to a strange carriage. This carriage also stopped among those of the other guests. Someone recognized it as the delegation from the kingdom of Kalka. No one had expected them to attend the founding festival, as they were rather conservative. But it could be presumed that Duke Heigenberg had invited them, as many had heard he had formed an alliance with them. It was said that the people of Kalka kept snakes as pets and drank wine from the skulls of the barbarians they killed, all of which sounded rather terrifying. The delegation was led by Tomon, the commander-in-chief of the Kalka kingdom. His appearance was exotic and wild. He noticed Duke Heigenberg and walked toward him. He bowed to the Duke, and Dante replied politely that it was a pleasure to see him and that he hoped Tomon's journey had been safe. Tomon wanted to know who the lady beside the Duke was. Dante introduced Ariana as his wife, the Duchess of Heigenberg. "It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Ariana," the girl said, looking at her new acquaintance. She said she hoped the guests would enjoy themselves. In the Empire, Tomon knelt on one knee and asked the lady to grant him the honor of allowing him to offer her the oath of the desert. The suddenly furious Duke demanded that Tomon stop spouting nonsense and get up from the ground before he did something. Hearing these harsh words, Tomon only smiled more broadly. He apologized for frightening her. He then explained that the people of Kalka offer the oath of the desert to the most beautiful person they meet in their lifetime. Since Ariana was the wife of Duke Heigenberg, the savior of his people, Tomon would be greatly honored if she would accept this oath. She will not accept it, the Duke growled, shielding Ariana with his body. Ariana was frightened, because this was a representative of another country, and because of this situation, rumors could spread that the Duke acted arrogantly. Ariana intervened, saying she had heard that Kalka was incredibly beautiful, and there were also rumors of Toman's bravery on the battlefield, and that the people of Kalka cherished honor and did not tolerate rude treatment, especially when it comes to coveting what belongs to others. Toman bowed, confirming that what Ariana said was absolutely correct. Toman smiled and said that the people of Kalka, always favored those who knew how to respect value. He hoped that one day Ariana would witness this for herself when she visited Kalka. Only Dante declared that this would never happen and that he didn't need any oath to ensure his wife's safety. Let's go. Ariana, he said, placing a hand on her shoulder and pulling her away. Ariana asked Dante if they could just leave the man there like that, as he was only being polite to her because she was the Duke's wife. But Dante replied that there was no need to worry. It had nothing to do with politeness. The man simply found Ariana very beautiful. Many people didn't know it, but the people of Kalka were practically obsessed with beautiful appearances. Ariana asked Dante if he thought she was beautiful. What? Dante asked in a tone that made Ariana completely regret asking the question. She didn't quite understand what had possessed her to ask such a thing. Now she just felt embarrassed. The Duke grabbed her and pulled her toward him. He demanded that she never make that face in public again, as it was driving him crazy and he was about to lose control. Ariana thought of the kisses and everything that had happened between them. Perhaps I shouldn't have asked him something like that, Your Grace. A voice suddenly reached their ears. An aide said the Duke was needed in the interrogation room. Dante turned to Ariana. She said everything was fine and that she would chat with the other guests while he was away. Dante said that if anyone said anything foolish to her, she should just put him in his place, and that she could use the Duke's power and status as she pleased. With those words, the Duke left, leaving Ariana somewhat bewildered. Hello, Ariana. She suddenly heard a voice that I was just looking for you, said Elena, who had walked up, dressed magnificently. Ariana noted that Elena looked well. The trading company must be very profitable. Elena said that after the ships returned, she and Edward would be much richer than before. Ariana should have listened to Adolf, just like she did. Elena added that she heard His Majesty had commissioned Ariana to perform at the closing ceremony of the founding festival. That's right. Ariana confirmed. Elena leaned in closer and wished her good luck, though she expressed doubt that Ariana could achieve anything with only the pledge of merchants and a single village as aid. Elena said she just didn't want her sister to overwork herself, since their next performance would eclipse the last one anyway. Ariana smiled and advised Elena not to be so arrogant. What? Elena asked with a frown. Ariana asked her sister if she really thought she had found all the evidence of Elena's connection to Lucas. Elena didn't understand what she was talking about, because as far as she was concerned, there was no more evidence. Ariana smiled and said she even knew about the drugs Elena was taking to induce pregnancy. Nonsense! Elena shouted in anger, but she quickly composed herself, looked around, and then asked Ariana why she would say such a thing. Ariana replied that Elena would find out sooner or later. She bid her farewell, saying they would meet again. She intended to enjoy the show from the front row. At that moment, the Duke entered the room. Look who's finally here, the Emperor said to him. Dante asked if this was really the leader of the Dawn Alliance. They told him he had been the leader for 10 years. The Emperor said it seemed all the murders revolved around him, so it was possible he was involved in that incident as well. Dante asked if this was the man who had harmed his wife. The criminal flinched at the Duke's tone. Dante said that perhaps the others should leave the room. He was afraid what he was about to do would not be a pleasant sight. The Emperor decided to take the advice and rose from his chair. He said he was confident Duke Heigenberg would succeed and asked to be reported to when it was over. The second person present, the Crown Prince, said he intended to stay, as this man was not a petty criminal but a traitor to the Empire, and at least one member of the royal family should be present for the interrogation. As you wish, Dante said. The prince glared at the Duke's back. He thought to himself that a bastard was being far too insolent, lacking the proper respect for the heir to the Empire, just because he was his father's favorite. Dante took a few more steps toward the criminal. He ripped off the bandage that was preventing him from speaking. The criminal shouted for them to just kill him, as he had nothing to tell them. Dante replied that another member of the Dawn Alliance had already confessed to the murder. Last night, he said, it was about 10 years ago. The Alliance was hired to eliminate Count Lopez. But the man swore he had nothing to do with it and urged the Duke to believe him. Dante demanded to know who had hired him to kill Eduardo Lopez. A sharp blade was pressed against the criminal's throat. Go on, kill me, the man shouted. He still had no intention of saying a word to a butcher like the Duke, a man who willingly went to war to kill people. The Duke used the weapon in his hand. He said that yes, he had indeed killed many people, which was why they called him a butcher. This meant he knew exactly where to strike to make a man talk. Then he asked again, who wanted Eduardo Lopez dead. Dante thought the man's eyes looked strange, as if something frightened him more than torture and death. He moved the blade again over the criminal's wound. I'll tell you, the criminal shouted, the pain making him talk. He even began to say the correct name, but he didn't get to finish. Something distracted the Duke for a moment. Dante spun around quickly. A dart flew into the criminal's throat, cutting off his words and his life. He coughed up blood. The Duke looked at the opposite door. Dante could only confirm that the man was dead. The prince began to call for the guards, shouting that there was an intruder. He wanted to know who had dared to let an intruder into the imperial palace. But the criminal had been on the verge of naming the client.